This is going to be the first episode of our podcast. The speakers which are here may or may not rotate in quantity and the actual specific speakers. Myself, I should always be here, like no matter what.
Your stream, I'd hope you would be.
Yeah, I mean, obviously. As far as faces go, I know a lot of you have heard the voices of many of the people that I regularly have on stream. Now you kind of get to see some face to associate with them. Aside from that, what I'm going to try to keep on as best is when someone is like speaking and kind of has the stage, if you will, I'm going to kind of enlarge them as such and make them, bigger. That way, you can start to kind of associate the direct, the username directly with the person. We will do a small intro. I'm assuming all of you know who the fuck I am. I'm Burt Macklin. If you didn't know that, what the fuck are you doing here? If you don't know who I am, drop a follow. Because again, why the fuck are you even here? Come on. Let's go, bitches. We'll just go down the line. Mikhail, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mikhail. I'm a Libra. I like puzzles. I like long walks on the beach. I don't know what you guys want to know about me, but I'm here. I'm excited for it. Feel free to drop questions in the chat if you have any. I don't know, my content areas, I guess, which are important. I like movies. I've been watching a lot of movies recently. Mario and I talk about movies all the time. I'm a bit of like a comic buff, but more so like adjacent to my friends. Mario gives me a lot of this. Mark, who comes up, will come up later. He gives me a lot of my comic book knowledge. So yeah, I'm just excited to be here.
Alrighty, Nicky J, take it away.
Like Mario just said, I'm Nicky J. It's obviously a nickname. Nick is my real name, Nicholas J, if you would. Basically what I do, I am an accountant at a civil engineering firm. Went to Chatham University, which is how I met Jeremy, who then introduced me to Mikhail, Mario, everybody. My background is mostly going to be video games, some movies, not nearly as many as Mikhail and Mario. And I will admit I am pretty low ranking for comic book knowledge. So, yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I usually keep it off to the side here and will just shout random things that I found funny. I would win Abuses mod to give myself 100k. See? Nice.
And then immediately lose it all in roulette.
Oh, Jesus. Alrighty, Mark, introduce yourself.
I'm Mark. My expertise definitely lies in comic books and video games. I would say me and Mario have pretty similar comic book knowledge, but he knows significantly more about movies than I do. I'm not really up to date on that kind of stuff, but I love like the lore in video games and that kind of thing. I play a lot of RPGs, a lot of like games like Dark Souls with really rich stories. So I'm just overall excited to be here. My camera's probably not going to stay on the whole stream, but we'll see.
Mark's more or less here just because we felt bad for him.
Yeah, we pity Mark. Last but not least, Adam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Adam. Go by Masterlock in a lot of games. I unfortunately don't have a webcam, but that'll save y'all the pain of looking at me the entire stream. My most of my expertise is in movies, probably a little bit less than Mikhail and Mario, and less comic book knowledge, but also video games as well. And other than that, happy to get talking here, and like everyone else said, feel free to drop some questions. Be happy to answer them.
On the topic of questions and things along those lines, we will most likely have a Q&A section at the end of the podcast. We're going to kind of have like a weekly topic that we'll do each week. We might at some point, or maybe once every now and again, do a news podcast where we kind of talk about things, trailers and such that are going on in relevant pop culture. But along with that, we will do a Q&A, whether you want to ask questions about things we said, opinions we may or may not hold that we stated throughout the podcast, or completely random off-the-wall things that you just want to know. The Q&A portion will be your opportunity to ask those. But again, everyone's kind of got a different ranging quantity and quality of information of pop culture subjects they know about. But this is just a podcast about nerd shit by the fans, for the fans. At the end of the day, none of us are professional filmmakers, writers, or illustrators. This is all purely from a consumer standpoint. Some of us, may know a little more on the professional aspect. Shut the fuck up, Nick. But I just want to let everyone know that none of us are claiming to be high-ranking experts or anything like that in any of the regarding fields we speak about. These are merely opinions, and if you get butthurt, feel free to hop on over to the YouTube where the podcast will be uploaded in full length without cuts or edits, and tell me how much you hate our opinions and our hot takes, or how much you agree with us. Who fucking knows? But yes, Nick.
Offended that you don't think I'm a master illustrator after all of the Aussie drawings, which is now going on probably like 30. That one hurt a little bit. It's okay. I can totally understand.
Can we take away a Benny for that?
Yeah, yes, sir. So
that is not for y'all to decide.
We're gonna do a chat poll and take away your Benny. Jeremy has to abide by those rules. But today's episode, when we had originally discussed it, the topic as lined out was going to be what makes or / I guess how to write a compelling villain. Right off the bat, I'm gonna just kind of mix things up a bit. I don't like the way that's worded. I think that a villain does not have to be compelling to be good. And I think that when we originally kind of talked about this brainstorming wise, what we really are talking about is what makes a good villain and how to write a good villain. And we use the word compelling as if it's a synonym, which I do not think that it is. I think a villain can be completely and utterly uncompelling, yet still be fantastically written and designed.
That's fair. But I would say that a great quality of some of the best villains is that they are compelling. Which, I mean, that does go hand in hand, but...
I feel like a good villain can be non-compelling or not compelling in the regards that there's such a disconnect between, like, what you would think of and how your brain works to the extremes that the villain is willing to go to, or the absolute insanity that the villain is going to, and that disconnect between the viewer and the villain can make a villain uncompelling, but still be a really high quality villain. Like Cthulhu, for example, I wouldn't consider Cthulhu compelling, but I think it's a great antagonist to that whole series and a great world villain. But it's not a compelling villain, just the big bad, and it's just good. It just works.
Let's just start really quick. We do have a question from Jared in the chat.
Hold on. I literally said, Jared, and if you missed it, I'll repeat this for you. There will be a Q&A section at the end. Eat my literal dick and balls.
I like that.
Also, fuck Jared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess, what are we defining as compelling and its importance to, well-written villains? What because by my perception, a well-written villain is compelling. You can't have a villain that isn't compelling.
So
what are you guys defining
so I guess as a group, I think that should kind of be our first goal. I do have Google here pulled up. I'll showcase that on stream for you viewers. Why don't we just, I guess first, what the fuck is the definition of compelling?
I was about to look.
Evoking interest or something like that.
All right.
Also, Mario, do we want to temporarily request that viewers don't gamble in the event that we have a Q&A as they come up, or no? Because
yeah,
Jared
if you
is bound to make sure that he remembers.
Okay, yeah. If you have questions and such, don't type them in the chat now because there's tons of shit going on, and if people are talking amongst themselves or whatnot, kind of as the stream goes on, I don't want your questions to kind of get lost in the rough. So when the Q&A question section does come down, write them down separate or somewhere you can keep track of it, and that way you don't forget to ask your question. But if we look here on stream, the definition of compelling is evoking interest, attention, or admiration in a powerfully irresistible way. Secondary definitions include not able to be refuted, inspiring conviction, and not able to be resisted or overwhelming.
I feel like I've got to agree with Mikhail here.
Oh.
Pretty much how I feel about most villains is if they're, like he was saying, essentially, if they are well written, I agree that they're, I'd say, almost always compelling. And actually, I'd just say I agree that they are compelling because I can't think of one off the top of my head that isn't whenever I think of well-written villains.
So are slasher killers and the monsters in 80s horror flicks, are those compelling villains?
Yes, because you're kind of compelled. I mean, I guess like if you use the extended definition of like the conviction, like all that stuff, like, but I don't think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about like attention grab, be a better word, I guess. Michael Myers is a fantastic example of it's literally a dude in a fucking what's the guy?
Just a mask, right?
Yeah.
William Shatner.
Thank
It's
you.
Captain
It's
Kirk.
just a modified William Shatner mask that they found at a dollar store. There's not much there, but the acting, the action that happens in the movie, like you're wondering what's, there is conviction. The movie wouldn't be the movie without Michael Myers.
And I think an important thing to note there, I think compelling can be made by a performance too, especially in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm unfortunately gonna throw my first one of best villains out there is Hannibal Lecter.
Yep.
On terms of being written very well, and then Anthony Hopkins' performance of Hannibal Lecter is literally masterclass.
And what's his face in Hannibal too? I mean, it's like sort of similar, sort of
Mads
different.
Mikkelsen?
Like,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're both really incredible, and I think it's like even just to relate it to like the hack and slash stuff, like just like the presence of the villain can be compelling. Just like the way that they're portrayed and the way that they act and they move even.
And I assume our definition for writing too isn't like literally just the script, but like the creative, like the creation of the villain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that would
it's
be
like
a
the
better.
final product is going to be like, after you take into account acting, backstory, all of that together, and that's what we're judging.
I
I
think
would even
something.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying. I think you gotta also take into account some of the how well they fit into a story to be how well they are written, because in like one of the movies I think is the best of all time, or at least very well made, is the first Saw movie. I don't know if you all have seen that, but just how the story pulls you along. You don't even know who the antagonist is until the very end, and you want to know who it is the entire movie. And it just kind of, the story is just giving you a little bit of crumbs, and I feel like that is great at making a antagonist who it is, just based on how it's written along with performances.
I can agree with that entirely. I think the Saw example, Jigsaw being a compelling villain, is a great
I
example.
lost my pencil. Sure. Notes and
We didn't hear a single thing you just said, Mario.
It's okay.
Wholeheartedly agree. Also didn't hear you. I'll be right back.
No problem. I will say that just for everyone, the viewers, Discord has some audio issues. Sometimes my audio will cut out for the people I'm in call with, even though you guys perfectly heard me. Just like that, they were unable to hear me. I was just saying that I think that the Saw is a great example. I think Jigsaw is a great compelling villain, especially in the first movie where, you know, as Adam stated, you don't know who the killer is. I do have a sort of double-sided question, or I guess a dual-faceted question. Um, does the genre in which a villain is in change the prerequisites that makes them a compelling villain? And if so, is a villain's, I guess, if the villain is or is not compelling, is that based on the narrative? Can a villain be compelling in a garbage story? Can you have something that's objectively bad, or, you know, the plot doesn't really suit the villain? Can a villain be objectively compelling, isolated from the story or the setting in which they come from?
I think that a vast majority of villains are kind of stuck in their respective stories. But I think there are a handful of them that are, you know, iconic. Like they're just, um, you know, like the Hannibal Lecter, the Joker, like that kind of overarching, you know, masterclass villain is in kind of a class of its own. But if you take something like Michael Myers, which is a really great villain in the context that he is, but if you take him out of that context and put him into something else, I just don't think it works as well.
I second
But
that.
yeah, because like the
Yeah.
Joker, for example, has been put into, you know, has always been in the same movie, but all the movies are different. And he works in all the movies and all the comics and all the cartoons and all of it. But Michael Myers only does one thing for however, like 13 movies or however many there are. And that's great. And he's a great villain. They're great movies. But once you take him out of that dynamic, it doesn't work.
I agree. I I think it can vary, like you were saying with the Joker, and if you pick and choose what you're like, what genres you're pulling from, like sometimes you can get like scary horror movies, and you can get them to mesh a little bit with things that are a little out there, like comedy almost, or and you can pull villains that normally wouldn't work in a straight up slasher horror film that you can kind of work into um, movies like that if they're kind of teetering on the edge. But I would say most of the time, uh, it's hard to pull villains from different genres and um, say they work in like a catch-all kind of scenario.
What's interesting about that, Adam, just whenever you first said, like, oh, you can put a villain into a comedy movie or something of the sort, and to build off of what Mark had said as well, um, like, I think Joker is a perfect example of that, where you have a fusion of two styles to make a good, like, a really, I like, I'm starting to hate saying the word compelling, but like that's what makes him such an interesting villain, is that he can cover so many different genres almost.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And
on that note as well, I would say that I think that, you know, the comparison there, like, I think the Joker is, you know, primarily comedy with those evil elements kind of on top, like, would be the icing on top of his comedy cake. Whereas if, you know, you take something to go back to the slasher villains, if you take someone like the Ghostface Killer in Scream, is primarily a evil murderer with the icing is comedy. And I think that, you know, that kind of aids to, you know, the slasher genre, I think, had kind of taken a massive dip in not only popularity, but also just pop culture, like, prevalence. After the 80s, after you had such a massive quantity of sequels and spin-offs, etc., from everything from Halloween to Friday the 13th to Nightmare on Elm Street, Chucky, the Leprechaun, etc., etc. The list goes on and on. And when you get to the 90s and even now to modern day, slasher films that are original concepts don't really tend to pull off very well. And if you look in, like, let's take the 90s, the generation right after the 80s, if you take something like the franchise I Know What You Did Last Summer, no one really talks about that franchise anymore because the villain was very copy paste of slashers who came before, Whereas if you take Scream, which has since had in the last decade a spin-off TV show, another sequel, and Scream 5 is coming in the following year. I think that kind of adds to the complexity of the character because they kind of took something that had worked and built upon the formula. More so than the original inspirations.
Very fair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that part of what makes a villain compelling, especially in the context that they're in, is when the movie or the media comes out. Because, as you were saying, slasher films are taking a dip because in modern day, no one's afraid of that shit anymore. Now it's, monsters and, quote unquote scary shit, ghosts and evil demons and things that our modern day CGI can make really truly unsightly and unnerving. While back in the 80s, when serial killers and things of that nature were like an issue, and it was something that was hanging over everyone's head. That's one of the things that make these movies so iconic. Or a movie like The Exorcist, which is, objectively not scary, but it was, because that was something that people were legitimately afraid of, and there are still people who are legitimately afraid of it, but it's not like it was. Not like, I knew someone's father who passed out in the movie theater and went to church the next day and had an existential crisis because of The Exorcist. And that movie it's a great movie and it's compelling, but if that same movie made the same way came out now, it just wouldn't work. It wouldn't be compelling.
So I guess to kind of keep pushing the questions on you guys, that leads me to the next step. As time goes on, and I think this is kind of an issue that all media faces, not just with character creation and writing, but everything. Does it become harder and harder to make a compelling villain without him or her also being a complex villain? Is that a necessary aspect to, does your villain have to have an intricate backstory and character traits and things that make them not only, evil, but also intricate to make them compelling?
I would say that they don't necessarily some of the best villains aren't necessarily the ones that have like hours and hours of lore you can dive into to look at their backstory. I mean, you can take one of the movies I think is the best of all time with a villain is Seven with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. John Doe, you know next to nothing about him until 10 minutes from the end of the movie. You don't learn a ton about him really at all at the end. You just kind of figure out what his motives are and what drove him, and that little bit of um detachment of who he is and why he's doing what he's doing, and he's, in my opinion, one of the best villains of all time.
I think an example that goes hand in hand with the Seven is No Country for Old Men. I think that kind of fits a very similar boat where, for that movie, you spend a lot of time with the central character or the central antagonist, and you learn little to nothing about why they are the way they are, but you remain on the edge of your seat, enticed in what's going on, things about that character, without any information.
I have another villain I use in quotation marks because he's also the main character of the movie. American Psycho.
Patrick Bateman.
Yeah, he is. You don't really know anything about him. You know where he works. You know who he is. But you don't know. He's just he is objectively a murderer, and you're with him the entire movie, and then it ends, and you never really learn anything about him. You learn that he's a fucking psycho, and then the movie ends. And I love that movie, and I think he's a fantastic character, and I think he's a good villain for the context that he's in. But again, just like Seven, just like No Country for Old Men, we don't really know anything about him. There's no lore. It's just a great movie and a great character.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I think that's a wonderful example. And one of the notes that I had was that like the term villain and antagonist, I feel like, are two extremely separate things.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like antagonist is the foil to the protagonist, but the villain is like, I think that an antagonist is like a better developed villain in a way. Whereas, and this is obviously where my lack of expertise or real knowledge shows, you can pretty much just like throw any villain, they probably won't be that compelling, into a superhero story, and then you just kill them off in one movie or one comic or one story arc or whatever.
Well, I think that's a huge problem with modern day like superhero movies is they really have a bad habit of killing off villains that are fantastic characters, but they kill them off in one movie and then there's no room for them to grow. Um, like, Thanos. Thanos has a huge, a huge wealth of stories that he's been in, some good, some bad, that they could have used and they could have continued to use, but they take like the most extreme and they put it in the front and then that's it, he's done.
Well, I think that's sort of the plague that comes with making movies, though.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's one of the things I'm worried about if they put Doctor Doom in the mainstream Marvel comics, because he is a fantastic villain and he is by far one of my favorite characters in the comics, but it wouldn't surprise me if they killed him off in one movie and then that's it, and then we've lost this fantastic character forever.
So bringing in some of the comic aspects, I will say that there's a phrase who the fuck said this, but you either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain, or whatever it is. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about? I don't know. I don't know who the hell says that. But the point is, in as far as comics go, which is where a lot of characters come from, I honestly think that it actually plays out differently. I think that villains that do not last enter as villains, stay as villains, and die as villains, and they're done. But regarding comics, villains that stick around tend to stop being villains. You tend to get more and more development. You tend to get more and more story arcs. Eventually, a lot of villains, i.e. Doctor Doom, Thanos, Venom, the Punisher, all of these characters aforementioned were introduced purely as villains, as bad guys. They were the antagonist and the villain to the story they were in, and they served no purpose other than to hurt the heroes, kill innocents, and do bad things. But as they survived, as they went on, as they moved forward, every single one of those villains at some point, whether they stayed that way or not, did become, at the bare minimum, an anti-hero, which I think is a big part of discussion in the whole compelling villain aspects. Are anti-heroes, I don't even like the term anti-hero because it automatically puts it more on the good guy aspect, where I think that, what makes a villain is mainly about perspective, and that's kind of a big aspect. But with villains that started as villains and become not villains, like for instance in current Marvel canon, Thanos is a good guy. Thanos is a part of the Illuminati, which is a core group. It consisted of Captain America, Doctor Strange, Reed Richards, Thanos, Professor X, and T'Challa. And a bunch of shit had happened with the Infinity Stones again. And all of them kind of being the heads of their respective areas, kind of agreed that, we can't just play with these things anymore because we're causing serious problems, which led to all of them kind of banding together, being from the separate groups that they are, and each one of them keeping one of the stones hidden in their own personal place that the others did not know about. And then, granted, that storyline goes way down a rabbit hole of other comic nonsense, but the point is, as far as that narrative is concerned, Thanos is a good guy. Thanos is on the side of the heroes who wants to protect the universe and wants to protect reality as they know it and doesn't want bad things to happen. Even though his origins are pure evil, he ended up becoming one of the good guys.
I think that has something to do with like a scale of bad guy. You know what I mean? Like, if you have Spider-Man and Venom are fighting, and then Galactus shows up, now both of them are at risk from the same thing. So even if one is a villain and one is a hero, that guy can still stay a villain. He still has bad intentions, but they have to team up for the against the bigger evil. I think that's a common trope in movies, especially, or comics, especially, where the villain teams up with the hero. Is there's something that is threatening everything. It's the bigger the threat, the more willing these usually evil characters are, the more willing they are to help, because it puts themselves at risk. Um, and this is obviously a discussion for another podcast, but I think there's a lot of things that we can pull from this discussion that can be directly implemented into what makes a compelling protagonist. I feel like good villains and good heroes kind of have the same qualities. They're relatable, at least for the most part. Most villains I find relatable or compelling or relatable, or they have some kind of compassion, or they have some kind of ulterior motive that can be related with, that is not entirely evil. A lot of heroes have done bad things, or are not entirely good, but they are doing things in the moment that makes them good.
To sort of not even shift gears, but I think we can sort of drill this home a little bit better. It seems like we're throwing like this word out, like compelling, like this is what makes them compelling, and like we're not really pinning down any characteristics that cause that.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured like we could just open that up a little bit. Like, is there anything in particular that, I mean, Mark, you said like being able to be a relatable ulterior motive. Like, are there other characteristics that you have?
I think single word is motive.
Yeah, like Dr. Doom is a individual who has done absolutely disgusting things, and is a top tier villain. But his motives and his motivations, I completely understand, and I get it. He is some crazy dude in a metal suit with superpowers that can travel through time and owns a castle, and I feel like I can relate to what he's trying to do. And that's what makes me enjoy the character so much, is because even though there is this huge disconnect between us, that realistically I could never understand what he's actually doing, is I get why he's doing it.
On that topic, I just want to kind of throw out some background information for the audience and for you guys who don't really have this specific comic knowledge, but I would say that T'Challa, Black Panther, and Victor Von Doom are two unbelievably similar characters with almost identical backgrounds, identical scenarios, and identical problems. Yet Black Panther is almost unanimously viewed as a hero, and Doctor Doom is almost unanimously viewed as a villain. Not to say that Black Panther has done all the terrible things that Doctor Doom has done, but the main difference here between the two of them is, for a very long period in time, as seen in the MCU, Wakanda was hidden to the entire world. No one knew they existed, and they were able to protect themselves, prosper, live, and thrive in power alone. Whereas with Latveria, where Doctor Doom is home to and rules, Latveria was constantly under attack and pressure from neighboring countries, outside governing bodies, and other villains, which kind of is what spurred Doctor Doom to literally rule the country with an iron grip, because if he didn't stand up to protect the innocent farmers of Latveria, then his country would no longer exist. Whereas with Black Panther, they didn't have that problem and are now a global superpower, able to protect themselves and no longer having to resort to violence and aggression to protect the things they call home.
I have one other one that I think is a really drives that point home of compelling motive, and it also branches into another aspect I think that makes them really compelling and such a great character, is being able to relate to everyday people like us. And that the character I think is Ghost from Ant-Man and the Wasp. Her entire motive is that she's not a villain, she's an antagonist. And she's not trying to actively hinder Hank and Scott and um, everyone. She's just literally trying for self-preservation. And at some point in like people's lives, like you have to do what's best for you, and she's literally only doing what she has to and using her powers because she's trying to not die. And I think she's one of my favorite villains in the MCU just because of how relatable she is to just everyday people.
Underappreciated as fuck, and the fact that the Winter Soldier is a massive fan favorite and literally falls into the exact same boat is really frustrating.
I think that's a common problem with villains is they're doing bad things because that's just either what they were made to do, what they have to do, or what they need to do to survive. Like they're not given a choice. Like Venom is essentially just a wild animal. Like they're not. It's not an evil thing. It's just it has to survive. It has to eat things, and it just so happens to latch onto someone who is not fully stable, and then it trails off into he's not a mastermind. It's just an animal trying to survive. If you put a wolf in the middle of New York, it would probably be a disaster. And it's the same kind of thing. That wolf's not evil. It's just that's just what wolves do. They eat meat, and we're made of meat. So that's how it is.
It's acting upon instinct.
Yeah, and I think that that's a big difference between someone like even Doctor Doom falls in the same vein as you were saying. It's just survival. In order to survive, things have to be done, and those things are not, necessarily evil. They're just in the pursuit of self-preservation. If any hero was put into that same situation, they would more than likely do the same thing because there's no choice. And at the end of the day, self-preservation, is the name of the game. That's what everyone's here for.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing to take a look at here is we've been saying a lot of people we think are great villains, really compelling characters, and we haven't really touched on some that aren't, or that we think aren't great, and why. One I'd like to point out, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, is Voldemort from Harry Potter. I'm not a huge fan of
Knew
him
we would
as
go there.
at a main villain of a story. If we're taking a look at other characters that even in the same books that I feel are better antagonists, and just because of how they are as characters, not like world-ending antagonists. I think Gilderoy Lockhart is a better written antagonist than uh,
Preach.
than Voldemort is. And I just finished rereading the second book today, and I'm just sitting there thinking he's literally only compelled by greed and pride. And oh, sorry, Nick.
No, go ahead. No. Finish your thought because there's a word that I have written down here that I think relates to a lot of this.
Yeah, and he's literally only compelled by greed and pride, and it's something that every person has fallen victim to at some point in their life. And he all he cares about is himself, entirely self-centered, and his motivation is to just make himself as famous as possible. He has clear-cut motivations, relatable to people like us, and it's understandable why he's doing what he's doing. So I think compared to Voldemort, who he likes killing people, I guess. He it's he's in my opinion a much better written antagonist.
I would agree.
In my minimal experience with Harry Potter, Voldemort seems to kind of go into the same mindset as like American Psycho and the other two movies that we were talking about, where the villain is a great villain but doesn't really have much of a backstory. That's what I've gathered from Voldemort is that I don't personally know anything about him, and there's no explanation for what he's doing, and there's no real driving motivation other than I'm just evil, and but it's not done well. Instead of it being done well, it's just not.
For having 7 books and 8 movies, you develop that character very little. And Adam, this was kind of going back to like the buzzwords that really got me. Like my problem with Voldemort is that he doesn't have he makes a terrible first impression, which whenever you see this, you need to be like, oh, that's the big bad guy. The first time that we really see Voldemort, Well, I mean, I guess you could say like whenever he kills the Potters in what, because that happens like in the first scene of the movie, right?
Yeah, I think
Or
so.
really of the books or really anything. And then you see him on the back of what the hell's that guy's name?
Quirrell's head.
Yeah. Like, and then that's it. And that encounter lasts for 2 minutes in the movies, and he's just gone.
So I'm gonna interject right there. Is first impression really that important? Thanos' first impression was pretty dog shit. His first 5 impressions were pretty lackluster, and
In the movies,
he's arguably Thanos. I mean, the every time you see him, whether it's any of the 3 or 4 end credit scenes he's in, the brief moment in Guardians of the Galaxy he's referenced, and even the moment where, you know, his iconic, I guess I'll do it myself, and he grabs the gauntlet.
yeah,
I mean, you know,
that's fair, but I think that ties with the other word that I said, or maybe I didn't even say it, is presence. Like, you see that, and you're like, oh shit. Like, and Mario, I think you and I talked about this. Go ahead, Mark. You want to interject?
I'm agreeing with you. I think that the difference between him and Voldemort is at the end of those movies, you see these end credit scenes, and you're like, so he's the reason all of this is happening. You get this presence that he's not there directly, but he is like puppeteering this whole thing that's going on Earth. With Harry Potter, it's like, oh, he has no nose, and then he disappears for 3 books, and then, oh my god, he still doesn't have a nose, but now he's a baby, and then
he kills Cedric,
and he's dead. Like, that's that's it. There's nothing there. There's no substance. He's not even a character. He's just like a sock with magic inside.
But like, I think it's an interesting point though, because like, you don't really establish him well as a villain. You can establish Thanos as being the big bad, even if his first impressions aren't that good, because he commands he has a commanding presence just by being this big fucker with a big gauntlet. It's like, oh my god, this is the big bad. And I think that a huge difference with that too is that a lot of Marvel fans will already sort of go into the movies knowing this. And I think that's where Harry Potter translates poorly between book and movie, is that you don't really get too much backstory. Well, I don't even know if it translates poorly between book and movie. I mean, I've read all the books. Granted, I don't remember them too well, but there's never a point where I'm like, oh, oh shit, Voldemort, like, we gotta look out for that. I'm more interested in the Professor of the Dark Arts every single time in every book. Because, good.
Oh, no, you finish what you're saying. Because
pretty much at any single point, they almost establish it as like, oh, like, this is about to be an incredibly important character, which I think is kind of a cop-out on J.K. Rowling's part. But we've talked very, very, very much about how badly those books are written. Every single one of those books, it's the Professor of the Dark Arts. Like, oh, hey, if like this is going to be like your important side character / anti-hero / whatever you want to put him as. It's like, why is it just always them? It doesn't need to be.
The Dark Arts are spooky, and they're the bad guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that kind of falls though into like a just weaker aspect of utilizing that trope, in which, you know, if you were, you know, not to compare it to Star Wars as I did in our previous discussion, but, you know, the Jedi don't learn or study or teach anything regarding the Sith because that just directly leads to corruption. And I think that that's kind of one of like the things where it's like, if you really are hyper analyzing Harry Potter, kind of falls down to a flaw of the school structure where it's like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? Like, literally, how many times are you going to make the same mistake? The stuff, and even the stuff you see them learn in the dark arts class, none of it ever really seems that bad. So it's like, what is the correlation? It's like there's not a strong enough correlation between the actual class and the contents being taught and the teacher becoming evil. And I feel like it ends up muddying the waters pretty hard between Snape being mostly redeemed. It kind of creates this kind of I don't know. It is difficult, I guess, from a character perspective to kind of grasp at understanding it. Where if it were in Star Wars, if the Jedi taught Sith teachings, I think it'd be fairly safe to assume the teacher who's just straight up, studying Sith holocrons would probably end up being pretty fucked in the head, which in the old expanded universe there are multiple examples of. But I think that that's kind of the core issue is that, I think she, in writing the books, is trying to pull on that aspect that, like, duh, it does make sense. Like, they're teaching the evil shit, so of course they're going to be influenced. But we're never shown the evil shit, we're only told about it. And there are multiple instances where the dark arts teacher is just not bad because, but then the other ones are bad because, and there's no logic to it.
Adam, you were going to say something earlier.
Yeah, the only other thing I was saying was I found that, and I know this isn't a review of Harry Potter movies and books here, but just branching off of it, another character who I think is even better written than Voldemort is his right-hand man, Wormtail. And part of that, I think, is done through how he was portrayed in the movies. Um, what's his name? Timothy Spall, who plays him, I think did a great job because that character is clear cut, driven by fear, like undyingly loyal, even though he's just horrified all the time. And most would see him as useless. He's the only one who fulfilled his character arc, I think, and it, he just feels like a better villain and I guess antagonist just due to how he has those character features, and you just, in my opinion, you really need that for me to care about who the villain is and who the antagonist is. And Harry Potter, I feel like sometimes gets a pass because of how vast the world is and how really different they were able to make it feel from reality, just with the boats that push themselves or things like that that you don't see every day. People found that part interesting, so they became invested in the story more. So I feel like that's just something I wanted to get out there for us to consider.
On a separate note, I've kind of been saving my first real hot take of the night until Mikhail returned.
I'm back. Miss you guys.
Welcome back. When you had kind of brought up first impressions, Nick, I kind of wanted to go straight to Star Wars. I
We talked about this.
do not think Darth Vader is that great of a villain in the original trilogy.
No, he sucked.
Do not think he's a good villain. I think that he is purely viewed in an era of nostalgia and cool factor, which, do not get me wrong, I am a massive fan of Star Wars. I'm an absolute slut for Darth Vader. That man is just mwah. The voice, the character design, his just first scene is a wonderful first impression. A just masterclass scene. He commands the scene. Everything about it is phenomenal. But I will say, and not that this is a slight against Darth Vader, Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia, immediately steals his thunder in a good way, which I think is really great for her character. But I will say that other villains in the series gut Darth Vader's presence. I mean, for fuck's sake, I'm more interested in Tarkin than I am Darth Vader. Who the fuck is this guy?
Fett.
I mean, who the fuck is this guy, though, that can just tell Darth Vader, nah, fam? And this giant menacing black samurai, like, evil person just listens to just old dude in military suit. It's one of those things that it really kills me because I feel like Darth Vader is kind of held up there in the echelon of premier top tier villains. And I'll just go out and say it. Kylo Ren is infinitely more compelling than Darth Vader, period. Just flat, objectively. Fuck you if you disagree with me.
I agree with you. I think that one of the reasons why he is so not great in the older movies is because his first impression was so good that it makes it harder to. So if you set the bar up here and then you sit here for the rest of the movie, you know what I mean? Like the first thing you see is he's just choking some dude in the sky. Like that's awesome. And then he doesn't really do anything. Like he chokes that guy at the table, but then he's like, "No, bad, stop." And then it's like, "Oh, like it's you set you." That's a thing with first impressions is if you set the bar way up here and then don't sustain that level or increase that level, then that makes the villain worse.
It's like a dog kept on a leash that's too short.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My biggest qualm with Darth Vader, I think that Darth Vader, if you compare him, like we were talking earlier about like slasher movie villains, he is compelling in that same way, where there's so much mystery about him, so much dark symbolism in who he is. All of that, fantastic. But it is ruined in episode 6 with his redemption arc that happens in the span of 5 minutes. I think that in theory there are some good pieces in play there. You know, a father and son, the father overcoming the dark side. Those are all good things. But none of it feels like it was developed from the get-go to occur that way, because there are zero consequences for Darth Vader. Like, I mean, I guess he dies, but he still comes back as a Force, which, sidetrack, huge pet peeve about the new sequels. They don't deal with that at all, but whatever. Forgetting about that. You know, he goes from being the evilest, most evil bad guy ever, who literally was part of blowing up an entire genociding a whole planet of people. I don't even know what you call it. That's more than genocide. That's like
Literal just annihilation.
yeah, like
Planicide.
the evilest thing you could come up with, you know? And then some, because the Empire still does even more fucked up shit than that. And then all of a sudden, he is redeemed because he helps his son once. And doesn't even eradicate the dark side. He doesn't even kill, spoilers, he doesn't even kill Palpatine. He just fucking threw him down a shaft.
I will say that in not to defend that he's compelling, because that my original point is that he's not. I will say that there are great moments with the character, especially in episode 6. There's, you know, if you take Darth Vader at face value, there's little to no way for that character to show emotion. I think that this is something that Star Wars has regularly done that is exceptional, is provide emotional context through characters that at face level shouldn't be able to provide any. Another great modern example is The Mandalorian. For someone who you very, very rarely, out of the 16 or 17 episodes that there currently are of The Mandalorian, you see Pedro Pascal's beautiful ass face like 3 times. And the moments you get to see it are in such high tension that it doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things, yet as a character is able to deliver so much emotion through a faceless mask. And I think that episode 6 really gives Darth Vader a lot of moments where, through just body language and the angles at which the helmet and his face are at, convey so much fucking emotion between him and Luke. Even though there's very little dialogue that he shares with Luke, I think that you garner a lot through someone who is this shadowy, objectively evil-looking person. And I think that there are credits to why people like him so much and kind of why he is, at this point, such a well-developed character. But I think that if you're basing it on the original trilogy, Darth Vader doesn't hold up.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
well, it doesn't hold up to what though? What we have of Vader now?
it doesn't.
Well, I would say that if you encompass all of the narrative from, you know, child Anakin all the way to the current point of canon, like, you know, all the information we have, I think that, you know, Anakin Skywalker is a compelling character. Darth Vader, it's an aspect of Anakin Skywalker. I think that the mere existence of Anakin's character arc really kind of invalidates Darth Vader having his own character arc, because the thing is you can only treat them as separate characters so much, because especially with how much information we have now, we know that Anakin has always the remnants and shards and pieces of Anakin's psyche have always been inside Darth Vader the entire time. And now that we're aware of stuff like that, it really is hard to kind of view Darth Vader as a separate character. Like, even back to when Obi-Wan says, you know, he originally tells Luke that Darth Vader killed his father, which as Obi-Wan says, from a certain perspective, yeah, technically that's true in the context that we have of the original trilogy. But now, from what we know from everything from the original trilogy, or from the Jesus Christ, from the prequel trilogy, Clone Wars, comics, like the current run of the Darth Vader comics from Marvel, fantastic. Provides so much context and character to Darth Vader. But at the same time, it really just continues to to hammer the nail in that Darth Vader is just Anakin.
Anakin Skywalker.
Is just Anakin Skywalker.
But then, then my counter to that.
About just, I'm noticing in the chat, Sniper Eyes is saying the Darth Vader meaning Darth Father. That was that comes from an interview with George Lucas. I've seen the interview, and that statement is suspect. The idea that Lucas had this pre-concept that Darth Vader was Luke's father the whole time. If you look into the history of that, statements that he's made before and after, like, people figured that out. Personally, I don't think he had played far. The Darth Father, that is like sort of kind of a thing, I guess, but like not really. It's a very loose translation as well. It's not like
not 1-to-1,
100%, like, especially when you consider pronunciation. I don't think that's a nifty Easter egg. I'm gonna be honest.
I'll be completely frank to everyone in chat. Take literally everything past, present, and future that George Lucas has had and will say with an absolute fuck ton of salt. There are multitude of quotes from back in the day where he cites Nazis as the pure and sole inspiration for the Empire and for the evil sides in the original trilogy. But then very recently had an interview where he said that his only inspiration for the original trilogy was America, was the Empire, and the Viet Cong were the rebels. And it's like, while that connection is there, and you can kind of see that in the Vietnam War compared to the original trilogy, you clearly didn't have that idea back in the day. And if you did, you were either too worried about public backlash to state it, or at the end of the day, he's either lying about one or the other. And the point is, George Lucas doesn't own Star Wars anymore, and don't take everything he says with as a fact.
He is a master of like creating holes, and not just like plot holes, but just like creating like vacancies and then filling them in later. And to an extent, it works out really nicely. I mean, like, the whole Clone Wars, in episode 4, like, that's just a throwaway thing. But then George Lucas comes back later and, provides some more content to sort of round out what seems like a throwaway comic. But he is but on the same edge, he also leaves plot holes and, like, story holes that he'll later come back and sort of retcon with something, but it's not really premeditated. It's very improvisational. Nick, you were going to say something, and I interrupted you to respond to chat for a moment.
If you look at, to sort of build on what Mario was saying, and it sucks because I'm like, someone else said something and then it led me to that, and now I'm trying to remember what the hell I was thinking. I think if you look at Anakin Skywalker then as a whole, on terms of being a full, literal, 360-degree character, would make Vader then a very good villain. Is that what you were getting at?
Well, so that kind of goes back to what I had said earlier. Mikhail, you missed this part, but also Jared, shout out to Jared. He clarified in the chat that Harvey Dent said the line that I quoted, that you either die, or you either, whatever the fuck it is, you die,
you live long enough, or you die a hero,
or you live long to
yourself become a villain.
Yeah, I quoted that line, and I actually stated that I think that as far as comics goes, I'm just going to reiterate this real quick for Mikhail. My point of view, because we were on the subject of some Marvel villains, and I was just saying that in comics, I think that it goes the other way. I think that villains that are not taken out or killed end up seeing themselves become, at the bare minimum, anti-heroes, and in most cases, heroes in their own right and their own stories, which ends up detracting from them as villains, which I will say in aspects like Doctor Doom, Venom, things like that, I think those are compelling characters and great characters. I think that the issue I kind of have at the basis of all this, of finding a compelling villain, is I think a compelling villain exists, like with Adam's example in the Seven with John Doe, No Country for Old Men. A compelling villain, most likely, in my opinion, exists in a bubble. It exists in a beginning, a middle, and an end, a story that is self-contained, and that's it. Once characters begin going past that, or you get before that, and they become more defined, they become more well-rounded, they become overall more developed, you have the Anakin problem, you have the Venom problem, you have the problem that so many at one point just villains see, where they become more than just a villain, and they are still compelling in some cases, but they're not just a villain anymore. Anakin is a hero, he's a nobody, and then a hero, and then a villain, and then redeemed. And I will say that it's a great character arc, but Anakin just isn't a villain in a pure sense.
My response to that is, I think you're conflating villainy and character. You know, and there are certainly examples of like villains turning good and stuff that are just handled very poorly. I think specifically in comics, when you have that, it's more or less just out of writer's block, where it's like, let's just try making this guy more relatable or whatever. There was definitely like a boon of like the redeemable villain, like an anti-heroes that people started to enjoy in media. So there is a lot of that where it's just like, for bullshit reasons, suddenly people are good now. But villain, you know, to me is not necessarily like a permanent marker. I think people like in media do villainous things, but villain is more or less a mark you give something after engaging with all of the media that they are a part of. And when you have like complete stories like Game of Thrones, I think is an awesome example, with characters like Jaime Lannister, you know, who like first season, you know, he kicks a kid out of a window, spoilers, you know, and then in the last season, which I won't spoil that, but like,
No. If you haven't noticed, if you're in chat and you haven't noticed, this stream does have the spoiler tag on it. If you're expecting to be protected here, this is not a safe space for spoilers. And if you haven't seen the media we're discussing, get fucked, kid. Spoil it away.
You know, just basically in the last season, I mean, I guess there's not really a specific thing that happens in the last season, but up until the last season, you're able to empathize with him more. And to me, the compelling part of that is after all of it, you know, well, we'll say up to season 7. Season 8 fucking sucks. But just after all of it, you can ask yourself, is Jaime Lannister a villain? And then you can answer that question. Some people would say yes, some people would say no. I personally don't necessarily think he's a villain. I think he's a product of his surroundings. You know, and so when you look at like another, I think, great example of that kind of writing would be the 2019 Joker. You know, you have this sort of origin story of this, you know, this new like Joker. And at the end of the movie, you know, that spends the whole movie giving you some kind of thing to empathize with. And then at the end, he does the villainous act. And then you're kind of left wondering, is he really the villain? Mm-hmm. You know? So when you talk about how like media that sort of takes a long time to get there, taking away from that, I don't think inherently that works that way. I think there are examples where, you know, the story doesn't really pan out, but, you know, characters transition in roles. Sometimes they're the villain, sometimes they're the hero. Obi-Wan Kenobi, as an example, you know, 4, 5, and 6, he's the sort of mentor, but in episode 1, he's the student, you know, and sort of
so
in episode 2...
I don't want what I said to be kind of misinterpreted, but I didn't want a blanket statement for all instances. What I had said wasn't really trying to say that in all aspects that holds true. Like, I more mean specifically with some of the examples that I said. I think that it's a problem that can arise. It's a problem that, and I will say, regardless of the success of the narrative, can arise more often than not. I'll say, like an instance where I think it works very well is like with Venom. Venom's redemption arc is fantastic, and if you're not very caught up or in full depth to your comic knowledge, Venom has been a good guy for longer than he has been a bad guy since he was created. I would not say Venom is a villain. I would just, at the bottom line, Venom is not a villain, period. He may have been at one point, but I think that time kind of does play an aspect into my interpretation of things where, like that character, a majority of his lifespan since creation has been spent as a good person and as a hero trying to do the right thing. Whereas like a character like, excuse me, in the Ultimate Spider, or not Ultimate Spider-Man, oh my gosh, the most recent Spider-Man arc, I can't remember the name of it to save my life. Invincible, I don't know, doesn't matter. Dr. Octopus and Peter Parker's consciousness gets swapped. So Dr. Octavius is inside Peter Parker's body. Peter Parker is inside his body. And Doc Ock comes under the revelation that without all the problems, trials, and tribulations, Superior Spider-Man, thank you. He kind of comes under the realization that without all the problems he had in his own body and his own life, no shit, Peter Parker's a hero. And kind of, he could have done terrible, fucked up, bad things. And I mean, there are aspects where he still is a bad guy, but more or less plays a hero role as Spider-Man. And again, with the time aspect, for a majority of Doc Ock's lifespan as a character, he has been a bad guy. And the current iteration in which he is not a bad guy, I do not think, I don't think that revokes his villain identity, if that makes sense.
I think,
Yeah.
go ahead, Mark. No, you have been waiting for a while to say something.
No, Nick, you talk. I'm coming over there.
Okay, cool. If this is what gets you to come over, then this is definitely worth it.
It's cute.
I think, Mario, you said this to Mikhail, or Mikhail, you may have just said this whenever you're talking about Jamie. The is he really the villain question. Whenever you said that, I was like, shit, there's like so many examples of this now.
Yeah.
And one of my brother and I talked about this the other day, because I told him about this. I mean, unfortunately, like he just doesn't have time with his job to really be watching the podcast or anything. He was like, you need to bring up Negan from The Walking Dead. Because literally, these are like the 2 points that I really wanted to hammer home, and this is what to me makes a very good villain, is he immediately establishes himself, he immediately has a presence, and you're immediately just like, fuck this dude.
And he's hot.
And he's hot, too.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan could fuck me.
Dude, exactly.
I would
like,
do horrible things just to get a sniff at that man's feet.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, you just agree to that, Nick? What is wrong with you?
This is coming from the man who wants to put his head in Sandra Bullock's ass. Shout out to chat. Nicky J wants to clean out Sandra Bullock's insides with his entire fucking head.
Okay. So, now that we're done with that, is he really the villain?
No,
is Negan really the villain?
As soon as you brought this up, I wanted to comment on this.
Mario,
no.
Listen,
it's literally not.
This is going to come straight into. I was kind of waiting until I didn't know how long it was going to take for me to kind of say this, but who is the bad guy and who is the good guy? Not in every story. There are clearly times where bad guys objectively bad, good guys objectively good. But
The Walking Dead is
The Walking Dead is well. I think The Walking Dead is it's a perfect example of the good guys are purely based on perspective. When you look at the things that Rick and his group do and start to do, they do the same actions in which they villainize other people for. And while, don't get me wrong, I understand the circumstances. The thing is with The Walking Dead, it's not supposed to be a all good versus all bad. It is supposed to be a story of how the apocalypse has damaged humanity and damaged society and taken away those aspects of society. When you look at characters, especially in the graphic novels, like Carol, like Carl, like Rick, and you see the arc they've kind of gone through, you see that they were people who were good, people who were pure, people who had ideals, but because of the circumstances placed into, had to do terrible things to protect themselves, and more importantly, their loved ones and their possessions. And I will say, if you look at the story from the other perspective, if you had been following Negan's group along the whole time, and Rick's group of hooligans blow the fuck up out of your buildings, murder a whole bunch of people, you would have been sitting there rooting for Negan to bring the absolute smackdown on Rick's group. And you would have been infuriated when Negan only killed 2 of them. You would have been like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You would have been like, kill them all. They're all terrible. But the thing is, at the end of the day, Negan killed 2 people for a quantity of over 3 dozen lives. Negan had pure and uncontested right to take revenge and annihilate Rick's group. But do you know what Negan did? Negan said, no, murdering you all would be the absolute counterproductive thing to reestablishing society. And you might disagree with Negan's politics. You might disagree with the social structure of their factions, because at the end of the day, they are like 2 opposing political parties.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, who's doing more to preserve, reestablish, and regrow humanity? The people who go around murdering hordes of other people because our people are the best, or the people who say you guys made a mistake and we're gonna teach you a lesson, but we want you to all live and survive and thrive.
Like,
fuck Rick, fuck Rick, fuck Rick, fuck Rick, fuck Rick.
Like, fucking Rick is like going about, right, doing his like Rick thing. And then he sees a group of people, and then in his head, he's like, oh, dang, those guys will kill us as soon as they see us. We should kill the fuck out of them. Like, it feels so hypocritical. And the whole time, he's just like, man, everybody around us is deadly as shit. That's awful.
And I think
the guns, like, fucking... And like, I get it. Like, it's not necessarily bad writing, but you could never say that Rick is the good guy.
But you also... but the thing, you have to feel bad for Rick, because the thing is they originally start off with the rule. They have the rule, and it's 3 questions. When they meet a new survivor, whether it's a group, whether it's an individual, they have 3 questions that they ask the person to even see if they're a viable candidate to bring them in. And if they answer the questions wrong, they fail like the test, they don't just murder them. They're kind of like, well, sucks to be you, goodbye, and they let them go on their way. The issue is, when it comes to the stakes of life and death of your entire group and all your loved ones, the first issue they have, yeah, it's bad when they're dealing with people like Merle and they're dealing with like slight issues in the group. You know, minor conflict, it's not that big of a deal. But when it escalates to the point where I think it finally reached the boiling point of the governor with a goddamn tank, I mean, at that point, when you realize, there is literally nothing stopping other people from just annihilating and killing all of us, you are kind of pushed to that point to where, do you risk yourself and all your loved ones for what? What do you risk it for?
I think that this goes, to pull another quote out of my ass. If you stare into the abyss long enough, the abyss stares back.
Speaking of asses.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're talking about your ass, or you're talking about...
I mean, yeah, take it as you will. These good people are put into a bad situation, and being constantly exposed to this bad situation makes them bad people. And it's even a stretch to say that they're bad people, because put in the same situation, I would do the same shit. If I'm in a situation where I'm under reasonable suspicion that if I'm spotted or that if I'm, seen, I'll be killed, then I'm just going to eliminate the problem the way that I see fit. And if that way is blowing some dude's head off, then I mean, so be it, because when society's no longer at play, the only thing is what we went back to earlier is just animals. It's
self-preservation.
I need to live, and I don't give a fuck about these other people, so they can eat my ass, and that's it. And Rick is a terrible person. I will agree with you, and I know what Negan does. I'd never actually watched it that far because I watched the show for the zombies, not the people, and then it started being about the people and not the zombies, and then I didn't give a shit.
Yeah, on a separate note, the graphic novels are so much better than the show, and if you haven't read them, go fucking
Are
read
they?
them.
I'll have to
Go
read
read
them.
them. They're so
Oh my
good.
God, they're really
so
good.
good.
And I agree with you that Rick is a bad person, and I'm sure Negan is also a bad person. But I feel like that's kind of the point. Is it's people put into a situation where they can know.
If everybody's bad, nobody's bad.
Now,
Exactly.
We,
us all detention.
now,
oh, sorry, Adam.
yeah. So
Welcome back,
Uh,
Mr. Locke.
one question I kind of want to pose, and what got me thinking about this is the TV show The Boys, and taking characters from there. One of my favorite villains in like TV is Homelander, and I would call him an antagonist before I call him a villain, just because we don't know where his story's going yet. And he's like teasing the line a little bit, and we see these things where a lot, like at least some of the seven are just murdering people, like willy nilly. A Train does it several times, sometimes on purpose. Um, Homelander, Stormfront, even Maeve every now and then, even though she doesn't want to sometimes, she still does it. Um, and then we see the boys doing basically the same thing in certain situations. And like Huey blows up Vanisher with C4 that he shoved up his ass. Like,
You mean translucent?
or translucent. That's what I meant. And he literally does that. They are the sole cause for Popclaw's death, even though they may not want to admit it. They basically were the reason she died. And there are several other times where they've killed people or caused basically the same kind of harm to supers. And does that excuse them and their behavior because they're at such a disadvantage from how the story is written, like how they are fighting supers and they have no powers themselves? Does that make them good people even though they're doing the same kind of things just at a disadvantage?
I would say no. I don't think anyone in that show is a good person. Even Huey started out as I would say, a reasonably good person, and then like immediately just nosedived into this just pit of being awful because Billy.
Fuck you, Mother's Milk's a good person. Changed my mind.
Hold on, but um, I think that Homelander is one of the few people in that series that has at least some kind of, I don't know if excuse is the right word, but he's very clearly like suffering from all kinds of shit. Like, the way that he was brought up, he's suffering from some kind of mental illness for sure, or several. He's unhinged. Um, and for good reason. He is the result of experimentation and, psychological torture and just like, it's just fucked up. Everyone else in the show are just people who were put into a situation where they could have been good and are just shitty. A Train, all of the people who aren't Homelander were raised as kids and then put into a situation where they had all the power and decided to abuse it. And then Billy and the boys are just people who have a good goal in mind, but then go about it the wrong way. But there isn't really any other way to go about it. So, they're obviously shitty people. Billy in particular is a shitty person because he isn't driven by some kind of high morality. He's strictly there for revenge, and he uses the idea of this high moral ground to kind of justify his point to get to his ulterior motive, which is fuck you guys, I want to kill Homelander.
I do want to include the aspect that I don't know if any of you guys here have are even know that The Boys is actually a comic written by Garth Ennis, or Ennis, however the fuck you say his name, the guy who did Punisher and a bunch of other iconic Marvel and Image comics.
Big wheel.
Yeah. But the comic is drastically different than the show. It takes place in the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s, when it was written, whereas the show takes place in modern day. That obviously includes massive drastic changes. Like one of the most notable changes, the instance in which you see Homelander and Maeve on the plane. In the comics, that's 9/11. And the whole thing that they fuck up, that they let 9/11 happen. And obviously that has different implications in the show and whatnot, and kind of affects things differently because the political climate's different, and there's all sorts of other aspects. There's tons of changes. Even like things as like Stormfront is like an Aryan male in the comics. It's like, you know, literally just like a Nazi super soldier. But one of the things in the comics that I think is drastically different, the show, like Mark said, everyone is more or less not a good guy. Whereas in the comics, we very briefly kind of got exposure to fucking what's the shit, the liquid, the Formula V or whatever it is, Compound V that they injected to themselves. In the comics, when the comic starts, the boys they already know about Compound V, and they actually have Compound V, and they work a lot more directly with the government, like right off from the get-go, and they inject themselves with the Compound V, get super strength, and then they pretty much are like superhero police, but like undercover. They inject themselves with the shit, beat the living piss and shit out of the superheroes, and they don't kill them. They take them, and they don't really arrest them either. They pretty much take them in, blackmail the shit out of them, and are like, you know, because at the end of the day, even in the TV show, the main aspect, you know, one of Homelander's lines is, you don't fuck with the money. Like, that's the main driving factor for a lot of the heroes and the supers in the show. So what the boys do in the comics is they capture them, blackmail them, and then pretty much release them back into the wild, like double agents. And they're kind of trying to bring things down from the inside, a little bit of a slower pace, and then kind of in a completely different way than in the TV show, where the boys seem a little more just like straight up fucking murderers. So I think that's a pretty interesting distinction that the show has taken, aside from the original source material.
I have not seen The Boys, but it seems to me just more or less a display of two wrongs don't make a right. You know, there's good guys accomplishing good things with bad methods. There's bad guys doing bad things with good. I don't know. Like superheroes who should be the heroes, but they're doing bad shit, so they're not really heroes. And then who should be the good guys also end up doing bad shit, so they're not necessarily like morally right just because they accomplished the task. I could be wrong about that though, but it just kind of feels that's the vibe I'm getting.
Well, what's your take, Adam? What's your throwdown on the boys?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last.
I just said, what's your take on the boys? Like, what's your throwdown of the question you had asked?
I think, and part of it, I agree. The comics are, or the graphic novels, or whatever you want to call them, are different. I actually have them as well, so that's part of why I posed the question. I feel like you said it, with it being a TV show as opposed to a novel or a movie or something like that. It does get adjusted, but also to what Mark said, no one is really good at this point. Like Huey, even though he was driven by the same thing that Butcher was at first, being the revenge for his girlfriend's death, it he got a semblance of revenge for it several times, basically. And he even so much as saved A-Train from his heart attack that he basically gave himself. And he's still doing it because it seems like he's trying to do the aspect of, I want to stop them all now so no one else gets hurt. But recently, other than, I mean, I guess there was a little bit, but they've been hurting people just as much as the soups have. And it really makes it hard to feel for them whenever they are doing the same exact things and being hypocritical.
I definitely agree, and I also think that Lamplighter. I think he's one of my favorite characters in the TV show, the iteration they have of him, and I think that he's a great example to kind of show that a lot of these characters are victim of circumstance. Um, Lamplighter wasn't necessarily doing good things, but his intention was not to just incinerate children. And you can kind of see the impact that had on him, literally leading him to the point of suicide. Because, I mean, what else was there for him? These people are fueled by money and fueled by these deranged goals that the everyman doesn't really associate themselves with. And I think a comparison can be made, which might sound a little bit weird at first, but from The Boys to The Incredibles. In the original Incredibles, when Mr. Incredible saves that guy from when he's dealing with Bon Voyage, he saves the guy's life, and the guy, sustained an injury and sued Mr. Incredible. And that, along with a lot of other things, kind of led to the crumbling of superhuman society. And when, from that perspective, obviously The Boys is a lot more of a darker take on that type of an issue. But when corporations and, kind of own and run superheroes, and at the end of the day, it is a business first, I think that it adds a lot of understanding to someone like Homelander's perspective when they're on the plane. I agree with Maeve. Could he have saved some people? 100%. But if he did, what would that have done to the company? What would that have done to his career? What would that have done to a bunch of other things? It would have, A, showed that maybe the superheroes aren't as capable as they are, B, damaged the company image and stocks, and C, potentially ended Homelander's career as a superhero and the face of the company. And I think that, while that's really fucked up that that's the kind of way that he views things in, it kind of gives you a window into why he is the way he is and why some of these characters behave the way they do, putting themselves and the company before the lives of innocent people.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes to show what the climate is today with businesses, in a lot of it being America, is that it revolves so much around how people view you, not necessarily what is the truth. It just, the small lens that you can see things through really really matters. And it, like, that's why I love Homelander so much, is as much as he is a terrible person for the things he's done, he also is relatable, basically. Like, he, you can see how much pain he's in all the time. And Anthony Starr does a great job portraying him, and the minor facial cues that he can give in scenes really drive that character
What
home.
an absolutely slept on actor. Like, without a
Mhm.
doubt. Does not get nearly enough credit for his performance. Doesn't, I don't think until The Boys he's really just gotten a lot of credit as an actor as a whole, period.
Mhm.
Also, I wanted to say this, but I'm eating a sandwich, so I didn't have the opportunity. The Incredibles. What a great, just fucking movie. Like, and
Yeah.
I wanted to say it too. Then this is more of a joke, really, than any actual discussion. But Bon Voyage is one of the greatest, just like corny supervillain names. Like, I think it's incredible.
Unironically,
It is
I
great.
stand Bon Voyage.
Bon Voyage is awesome.
I
Bon
like that it low key is anti-French. Makes me happy. French people suck, and any French people watching the stream right now, frick you. Man, we were talking about that example. That was the dude who sued Mr. Incredible. That happened in real life. there were people who sued after being resuscitated with like the Heimlich maneuver and stuff. I guess resuscitated isn't the right word. You know, they were saved with the Heimlich maneuver, and they sued the people that gave them the maneuver because they're like, you know, there was whatever damage from doing that. And now I forget what it was called, but there was entire legal action, the Good Samaritan Act. You know, if you're trying to save someone's life, you can't be sued for the consequences because you literally were trying to save their life. So that happened, and I mean, I guess in terms of the conversation of what makes like a good, you know, understanding the why is very important.
I agree, and I'm also going to say, to kind of, you know, I think the goal of the podcast is kind of to find, I guess, an answer if there is one. I think that the why matters, like Mikhail said, but I don't think that the why matters. And what I mean by that is I think that having a why is very important, but the context of what is the why doesn't really matter as much. I think that if you look at villains that do not have an explanation, regardless of what that explanation may be, whether it is literally a villain like, you know, in The Exorcism, the villain is the devil, and he's bad because he's the devil, compared to a character, you know, that doesn't have any reason at all. I think that right there kind of sets a standard into making a villain that's worth caring about and that people do find compelling and do find interesting. I think that's just an important aspect. I don't think there's a specific type, if that makes sense. It doesn't need to be like follow this trope of sad backstory, you know, Homelander being like a fucking lab room test tube baby, you know, things like that. Like there's not some checklist of ABC that you need to follow to provide that why, but I think having the why is what kind of makes the villain compelling or not. Even like with, you know, when Nick and Adam, when you guys were talking about Harry Potter, where's Voldemort's why? Where is it?
Well, he's evil.
Yeah, but like,
so that, I mean, you asked why. He's the bad guy, so he has to be the bad guy.
But then, like, what's crazy though is that
he doesn't have a nose.
They almost do it with the whole Tom Riddle thing.
Yeah.
They're talking so much about Tom Riddle, but then like it shows you the beginning and then literally nothing else.
I would like to touch on this because we talked briefly about it earlier. Harry Potter, you know, loved the series as a kid, and there's definitely, I think there's a reason why, you know, it's one of like the top rated like sort of young adult fiction novels. You know, I don't think it's wholly bad, but in terms of villain writing, absolutely horrible. We deal with, like, to me, some of the most contrived tropes, which are the prophecy. We're dealing with a villain that is completely unreversibly evil. We're dealing even just with the trope of evil bad magic, you know. The symbolism of snakes, again, just like another. Voldemort is bad, very poorly written. I think he's an example of, you know, a villain that is compelling on the outside, but then as soon as you dig, you know, just a couple of inches into those layers, there's just nothing there. It's a very hollow villain. And what kills me is the series does have some decent villains. I think his name is Barty Crouch.
Barty Crouch.
Barty Crouch. The dude
Barty
who
Crouch
pretends
or
to be
Barty
Mad
Crouch
Eye
Jr.?
The Junior. The dude who pretends to be Mad Eye Moody. That is a good villain. You know? The dude, I mean, not like the best ever, but like dude trying to get back at his father and stuff like that, turns to dark man stuff. Like, he's good. There are some gems. But Voldemort, bad.
Yeah, if your big bad is shit, then that's my problem. Like, that's my huge problem with that series, is that the big bad guy, I felt no reason to really be like, wow, like, fuck this dude. And they could have done it whenever he killed Cedric Diggory, but it just, like, no one talks about it
Yeah, he's
after it
literally
happens.
just
Well, he
trying
didn't
to
even
become
kill Cedric, though.
Oh, wait. Yeah,
Wormtail killed Cedric.
under the guise of...
Yeah.
Yeah, but, like, even so, like Cedric dies by pretty, I don't want to say by the hand, but pretty much like by the influence of Voldemort, and we don't care.
Yeah.
We don't
Voldemort
care.
is trying to become the most powerful thing ever, and that is compelling. And that to me is one of those situations where you ask yourself, why? You know, why is he trying to become so powerful? What could he possibly want to do with all that power? And the answer for that in the books is literally fucking nothing.
And
Like,
no
he
one
doesn't-
man should have all that power.
Yeah, he doesn't want to get revenge. Fuck you, Nick. He doesn't want to create something. Like he does want to advance the sort of magic purity, but to what end? Nobody really ever says. I mean, I guess in theory he thinks that the magic world would be better for that. But there are beats where there are so many things you could sort of have headcanon for, but they never give it to you. In theory, sort of freeing the wizards from this sort of oppressive, always having to hide from magic folk. That would have been an awesome angle where Voldemort is like, why the fuck are we hiding? We can literally turn these people into shit. Fucking let's go. And that's what Grindelwald is doing. Grindelwald's an okay written villain. But then Voldemort comes this close to doing it, and we never know why. We don't know why he's ever trying to do anything he's doing, except for he's bad guy who looked like Snake and has. Ugh.
Yeah.
Another question for you guys. Are y'all familiar with The Princess Bride?
It's been a long time, but yes.
Is Prince Humperdink a good villain? He's cited as the main antagonist of the film, but is he a good villain?
So, my take on Prince Humperdink is thus, because I love The Princess Bride, and I think Prince Humperdink is a really good part of that. In the books, I think the books, he's not necessarily different, but the books give him a little bit more time, but we're talking about the movie. He is a good villain, but he is only a good villain because he has a good hero. The service that he has for the narrative, which he does well and makes him a well-written villain, is being cruel and showing the way that love is able to prevail. Specifically, you look at the way he treats Wesley when he has him in the torture chamber. And he has this horrible device that sucks a year of your life away. In and of himself, it's not necessarily that's very compelling. But when you see Wesley going through that and knowing he's going through that because he loves Buttercup so much, the actions of the villain become compelling because of the reaction of the hero. So I'm going to have to say that Humperdink is written well and is a good villain because of his surroundings, with that caveat.
I will say I was debating you slightly because I was trying to get you to say something you did say, which is, I wasn't debating you in a bad way, I promise. I was looking for you to say the line, do you think he's a good villain because he has a great hero? Does a villain... I was just looking for Mikhail to state, or not necessarily Mikhail, but I was seeing if any of you would say that he's a good villain because he has a great hero. And pretty much where I'm going with that is, does the hero matter?
Absolutely.
Yes, very much.
No.
Oh.
I came prepared for this. Not necessarily at this point in the conversation, but it was something I was thinking.
If I may, just before...
Yeah.
Before you start, I just want to say one thing about Prince Humperdink. Alright. Prince Humperdink walked so Lord Farquaad could run.
Amen.
Let's
That's
go.
all I'm
Let's go.
saying. And
Podcast over. We've
yeah,
reached
that's
the conclusion.
That's the end of the episode.
is
That's
the
it.
perfect villain
We
because of
figured
the
it
actions
out.
of Shrek and because of every other. Shrek is the perfect movie.
We're not going there. We're not going there. We're not going there. We're not going there. We're not going there.
We will have an episode on why
Only
Shrek 2 is a perfect sequel.
We will do a Shrek episode. You have our word.
The DVD specifically. So here's my thing. One of the questions I asked, when I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking about, the relationship between the hero and the villain. And I think that a villain does not need a hero, a good villain. Not necessarily to say a good villain doesn't need a hero. Like, a good villain could have a hero and could benefit from a hero. But you do not need a villain or a hero to have a villain. But you do need a villain to have a hero. And basically, it can be summed up by this. Evil exists in the world. And that, in and of itself, is compelling. Nature documentaries, I think, are sort of a great example of this. Not that nature is evil, but, you're watching that documentary about the lions, fucking just murdering a gazelle, and that is sort of what we would sort of consider to be this concept of evil. It's captured. There's no hero in it. It's just a gazelle getting fucking murked by a lion, and there are villains out there that are kind of like that. They're a force of nature. They are doing evil things, and there's not a hero to stop them. They might stop because they reconsider their actions, and they might stop because something stops them. But there's not a hero character. But a hero character without a villain is more or less, useless.
So I definitely agree. I don't also want to go to a separate point before if Nick and Adam and Mark, if you guys want to say something on this topic, I do want to make a quick comparison regarding something you said about needing a villain to have a hero. In which I think clearly answers the question whether the Joker in the 2019 film, he's objectively a villain without a hero. And I think that a comparison can be made with the movie Megamind. And Megamind obviously becomes a hero and is the hero of the movie. But I don't think that transition could have been made without what's the fucking... the redhead cameraman kid, if he didn't become a bad guy, because the thing is what's the hero in that like the Superman kind of clone, the guy with the white suit and the gold and Metro Man, that's what it is.
That's it,
Metro Man. With Metro Man wasn't a bad guy, and so if the plot just contained Megamind and Metro Man, I don't think you fully could have got on board with Megamind actually being a hero, despite his, there's a multitude of things that play into him becoming a hero. But I think that the thing that really kind of solidifies it, the transition, is him literally filling the role against evil. But anyways.
Yeah. I did want to speak a little bit to what Mikhail was saying. And how I understood the question was when Mario said it was, does the hero matter? Not, does the hero make the villain? I think a compelling hero can make a villain that much better. I do agree with you, Mikhail, that if you have a great villain, you don't need a perfect hero. I just think the way the question was worded, I just interpreted it a little differently.
Valid.
So I was just saying more along the lines of it can enhance a villain.
And I would agree with that, too. I don't think that the hero never mattered. The hero can matter, and in some cases, like Humperdink, make or break the villain. But you do not need a hero to make a compelling villain. Which is, I think, what we agree on, Adam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah. Perhaps an example of this, of the villain that doesn't necessarily have a compelling hero, is sort of that narrative of like, oh, what's the word? Like the tragedy,
Mhm.
when you have a sort of story with a an antagonist, but you don't necessarily have a protagonist, like Oedipus.
Money for
Uh,
Oedipus.
Oedipus isn't the protagonist in that story. In case people aren't familiar. Just in case, there's this dude Oedipus,
Wait,
right?
what?
And he there's
I
like
believe some motherfuckers don't know who Oedipus is.
yeah, some witches are like, hey, you're gonna kill your mom, or you're gonna kill your dad and fuck your mom. And Oedipus
Like
is
all
like,
good
no, I'm
men do.
not. And then he does. It's a tragedy.
What a wonderful summary.
That's the entire story. Don't go read it yourself. That's the entire thing. That's all that happens.
More or less, that's
Don't read it.
literally all of this. That's it. I think he goes blind too. I think that was also part of it. Is that you're gonna kill your dad. You're gonna go blind. You're gonna fuck your mom.
Yeah, it's in that order though, because he doesn't know that he's.
Yeah, he doesn't know he's fucking his mom until his mom is like, "Dang, son," and he's like, "Fuck." His mom is Joe Costa. I think that's actually what happens. Is like he's like, by the way, he's like Joe Costa. Joe Costa D's nuts.
What?
Well,
Yeah, I do not know any motherfucker that wouldn't know the story of Oedipus.
The villain
Children.
in that story is sort of Oedipus, sort of just the concept of tragedy could be considered to be the villain in that story. But it's a compelling story that has villain, but no hero. Watching a volcano decimate a town, is something that people would be compelled by, and the volcano would definitely be the villain in that story. But there's no hero in that story. The town just gets fucking smoldered. That's compelling. That's television.
Kind of like Twister.
Yeah.
What a
Sharknado.
great movie. I love
I
it.
would like to touch briefly on Piranha 3D. Double D, in fact. That is another movie where there is no heroes. It's just a bunch of college kids in swimwear. And the bad guy is a bunch of piranhas. Great film if you haven't seen it.
What about The Meg? The Meg is knockoff Jaws, but with more penis jokes. And I don't know that any of them are the villain. I think the villain is the directors on that one.
The villain was the journey all along.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to go back to the MCU. I know we touched on this briefly a couple times. I wanted to bring this up earlier, but I was almost sure Mikhail would have commentary on my thoughts and didn't want to leave him in the dust. What's your guys' take on the aspect of copycat villains that the MCU really kind of, I wouldn't say struggles with based on my own perspective, but I think really contains, especially in reference to origin films. The MCU is host to a plethora of films where the bad guy of most origin movies is literally the hero with different ideals. Ant-Man, Iron Man, like in Iron Man, Ironmonger is Iron Man but big. In Ant-Man, the Wasp, Yellow Jacket is Ant-Man but he can fly. In Thor, it's fucking just
Really?
big metal god power thing. In just whichever one you want to really take your pick at, it doesn't really matter. But for a wide reach of the MCU origin films, the villain is more or less a power copycat of the hero. Good, bad.
If I can for a second, I feel like that is in origin films or where you're expanding on a character. Like take Thor 1 for example. He is the villain in that movie, I feel, is kind of secondary because it's giving you exposition on how Thor as a character is and how he's grown throughout one movie. And even though it's a lot of it is him fighting things from his home world, he is basically it's allowing him to grow and change and accept who he is on a different world and get his powers back. Um, Iron Man, that just kind of reminds me of The Social Network, but with more money and more bombs.
It's exactly what that movie needed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine Mark Zuckerberg with bombs?
I'm not a huge fan of Jesse Eisenberg.
Oh, I
Fuck
love
off,
Jesse
fuck off,
Eisenberg.
fuck off.
He's so good.
Andrew
Wait,
Garfield and
yeah.
Jesse Eisenberg's on-screen chemistry is literally golden, and if you disagree,
I'm
you're
not
a
saying
bitch.
that he's bad. It's just my taste. Like, to be clear, I don't think he's like bad or anything. He's one of those actors that I see him, and it feels a little samey to me. And I don't know. There are very few roles that I felt he was like the perfect cast person.
I think The
Adventureland.
Social Network is that. Not to get too far off topic,
Yeah,
but just with how well he encapsulates what Mark Zuckerberg seems to be like.
I don't want to. I'm not necessarily disagreeing that I think that he's good as Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network, but I would say that Jesse Eisenberg's best role of his career so far is in Adventureland. I think that he's
Bro, if
easily.
you've never seen Now You See Me Too.
Yeah.
Yikes! We're talking about compelling villains, not garbage films.
To answer your question about the Marvel copycat thing, I've seen that phenomena, but I think the copycat part of it is the way Marvel is trying to tell stories with the MCU is very different than the way a lot of other movies go about it. Other superhero movies that don't have like this sort of universe, it's all chronological. You get the first movie, and then between the first and second movie, there's some time, and the consequence you're seeing on screen is related to time. With the Marvel movies, because everything kind of comes together on this micro and macro scale, the macro scale is time, because throughout all of the movies, you see how the times change and the consequence time between this film and the next. But on the micro scale, it's geography. The consequences of what is happening at this place rather than what is happening at this time. And so because of that, when you get into the villain development for the movies, one of the sort of tropes you find is this, a lot of the villains are what's it called? Foils of like the heroes, because the villains are the consequence of the hero. And when you're trying to sort of explain geography and explain like, a great example, Wakanda, Black Panther, that's a villain. The villain is more or less the hero, just with different powers and slightly different ideals. The reason why you get that take, especially in the origin story movies, is because that gives you a really good idea of the consequences of the geographic location of Wakanda. What is happening in the world at that particular time, which is the macro scale. The micro scale you get in the movie is the place of Wakanda. And so having a foil relationship between the villains, that really helps. Iron Man is another good example of, in the first movie, Obadiah Stane.
Box of scraps.
You're going to get that. What?
I just yelled box of scraps. Sorry.
I
couldn't help myself.
God damn
You're
it.
going to get that in the origin story, because that is literally the consequences of like Tony Stark. That's like his whole thing. Fuck you.
I'm
So I
sorry.
think that's why we're seeing it, and I think it's a good thing, ultimately.
10 out of 10. I didn't bring up my question to really in a way to criticize those types of villains. More of just, I guess, if you kind of look at trends, I think something that's pretty interesting is specifically in the MCU, where I do completely support and agree with Adam's appreciation for Ghost as a villain. I think the MCU films follow a pretty heavy trend of the first film is viewed for a specific character is viewed in a lesser light as opposed to their sequel, which I think is interesting because if you are not invested in the first movie, what drives you to see the second one? Obviously, that problem is not as apparent in the current MCU where things are so widely connected, and now we've got TV shows. WandaVision is out. Go watch that if you haven't seen it, you fucking clowns. We just got a trailer for Winter Soldier and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Again, go watch it when it comes out. You will not regret it. Marvel knows what the fuck they're doing. God damn it. Don't be a fucking hipster.
knows what he's doing.
Yeah, Jon Favreau. We will have a Jon Favreau episode where we will literally just nerdgasm about Jon Favreau. And if you don't know who Jon Favreau is, look him up. You should know who that is if you appreciate film and pop culture. And if you do know who Jon Favreau is and you aren't absolutely in love with that man, what are you doing with yourself? But I'm getting sidetracked. My point is, I think that the foil villains serve a great purpose to get you invested in the primary character, and I think that it's one of those things where it's kind of like a it's where when people criticize the MCU for being formulaic, I think that's one of those aspects that people are criticizing, where I actually think it's one of the strengths in building that foundation where, you take a character like Captain Marvel, which was, Brie Larson and Captain Marvel were home to plenty of controversy, some of which I think valid, some of which I think absolutely ridiculous. But one thing I'll say is that, the general consensus of fans was that movie was pretty lackluster. As an absolute slut for lore, I disagree, but that's only because I have Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel. Okay.
That, I only think I disagree because I have an expanse of previous knowledge regarding the Kree and the Skrull, and that was kind of our real first big exposure to them and kind of teasing further storylines down the way. I will say that I think that if Captain Marvel would have fought a foil villain on the same power level or in the same boat as her, I think that the movie overall would have been better received. Or I'm sorry, not necessarily the movie, but the character rather. I think that Carol Danvers as a character would have been more understood, more appreciated, and kind of more just viewed in a positive light, whereas the movie we got with Captain Marvel was kind of just her doing shit. And she did shit for like an hour and 45 minutes, and then that was it. And it kind of left people who didn't give a shit about the Kree and the Skrull with kind of a what the fuck ever opinion afterwards. And, I hope that doesn't really damage the people who go see the sequel, because I think that following Marvel's trend, I'm assuming Captain Marvel 2 will be better than the first one. But I think that Marvel kind of sets the bar low, almost like a step stool. Sometimes people who, you might be able to reach that candy bowl at the top shelf if you stand on your tippy toes and really reach with all you've got. But if you just get a step ladder to get it, it makes it all that much easier. And I think that the original origin films for a lot of characters in the MCU function just like step ladders. I think that they literally place them out knowing that, is this really necessary? Is it required? Not really, but it's going to ensure viewer investment. It's going to ensure that general audiences view these characters in an understanding light, and it's going to provide people with a capacity to understand that character so much more, so that when you go into the sequel and the character is significantly more developed and interesting, like Adam's example, if you compare Ghost and Yellowjacket, I mean, they're not even in the same fucking ballpark. Just not at all. I mean, for fuck's sake. I have not met one person who holds the opinion that Yellowjacket's a better villain than Ghost, and that's because he's not. And I think that having that basis really provides people to kind of dive into something that may have been, a little difficult for the average audience member.
You wouldn't have really been able to have had an origin story without somebody like the dude whose name I've already forgotten, Yellowjacket, but I forget what the guy's name. If you had a character like Ghost, not only is the movie spending time explaining to you who Scott is, who Ant-Man is, who Dr. Pym is, and his daughter, and like how all of those things matter, but then they also have to explain to you who Ghost is, and frankly the consequences of Ghost's power. But we could even just eschew that and just say a character like Ghost, That's a very complicated, movie. and not something people would buy into, because when you're seeing that origin movie, like people who don't know who Ant-Man, that's why Yellow Jacket is a great villain for the first film, because he's simply just I wouldn't say he's really too much of a foil to Scott. He's more of a foil to Hank. But you get to see consequences of the surroundings of that hero and why their origin matters, And the reason you see it in Marvel so much is just because they're telling so many origins. If you look outside of Marvel movies, you pretty much get that in any origin story that's memorable. Episode 4, you have that with Darth Vader. You literally have the foil of the light side and the dark side. It couldn't be more extreme than that, Spider-Man. You have a foil with Green Goblin. Spider-Man and the Sam Raimi ones. Spider-Man, his whole thing is with great power comes great responsibility. And Green Goblin wanted to have power without the responsibility. He just wanted to have it, without going through the proper checks. Went crazy, killed himself. So yeah, and it's not even just superhero origin stories, but pretty much all origin stories, you're gonna have that sort of formula, because it's frankly just the best way to tell an origin.
Is what that sort of mirror character?
Yeah, I mean, because what the foil does, a properly written foil, is a way to show a relationship between two characters. Yeah. And foils can be side characters. Foils could be, there's a foil to the main character that is a side character. It doesn't always have to be like the two main characters. But it allows you to show a deeper relationship between the two characters. And when you use them in an origin story, it shows you consequence of either the character's past, a la something like Iron Man. The foil between him and Obadiah Stane is sort of the foil between Tony Stark and his past self. Warmonger, literally Tony Stark making money off of war is what creates Obadiah Stane. So it could be that relationship and that consequence. It could be the consequence of one's power, kind of like in Ant-Man and the Wasp, where the foil exists not necessarily between Scott and the bad guy, but in him and Yellow Jacket. The consequence of Scott having access to this suit is because of the way the relationship between Dr. Pym and, his product, his suit that he's made.
I like that you call him Dr. Pym.
Well,
it's his name.
I mean, he is, but,
They are. And so that display of consequence is just a classic literary device. I mean, hell, even Romeo and Juliet, the foils of the Capulets and the Montagues, or the foil between fucking Mercutio and I forget who his foil is. Tybalt.
Yes.
Yeah, those two characters where they end up killing people and getting revenge. You see the relationship between the family, and you understand why the conflict between Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy. Instead of just like, why do we care these stupid teens killed themselves? Like, why does that matter? Because it affected people around them.
Fuck them kids.
Yeah, because that consequence.
There's
that's why you see that.
Micah, I want your opinion on this, mostly because this is sort of one of the last real notes I had on terms of compelling villain. Would you say that Roy Batty is a foil to Rick Deckard?
Who is this?
Blade Runner, the first.
Oh! You mean the replicant that he's hunting down?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm also just a huge fan of Roy Batty's just final the Tears in the Rain monologue.
Yeah.
Because everything leading up to that scene is, I think it's perfect.
I think, my answer, my brain was just turned off.
No, you're good. They're also not very often referred to by their actual name.
I think that, they are. and the relationship that you see between the two characters, especially at the end, and it's why the tears in the rain line is so beautiful. You know, there's the confirmed theory, and just the whole. I mean, it was never really a theory in my opinion. It was always just a really good critical analysis of the book. But the theory that is confirmed that Deckard is a replicant, you know, when you take that into consideration, those two characters are a replicant that is, you know, underneath the thumb of humans and doing his job and literally killing other replicants and is restrained. Yeah. And then you have, you know, the one he's hunting down, Roy, who is, you know, living his life. He's free. You know, it's showing the relationship between freedom and captivity.
Servitude.
Yeah. And to me, Deckard pays the ultimate price. Because once he realizes what he is, which I guess is confirmed with 2077, that he realized all of that. But he pays the ultimate price because he ends up killing an innocent replicant. You know, he realizes, you know, technically between the two movies, but he realizes that he himself is a replicant. Basically, this whole time when he felt that he had free will, you know, that the replicants didn't have free will, turns out he was one of them. And so his entire worldview, you know, now he's essentially a murderer.
Yeah.
And that relationship between the two, as one being enslaved more or less and the other one being free, that is a foil relationship, and that makes everything that happens in Blade Runner just so much more
impactful.
Yeah, it's so much more impactful.
I think that's further perpetuated in the sequel, which I'm also a massive fan of.
You're cutting out really bad in Discord.
Yeah, I didn't hear any.
Vey. You hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're good. Yeah. I said that I think that's further. I think that it's further perpetuated in the sequel, which I'm also a big fan of. You know, where the main character is also doing the same type of activity that Deckard is in the original, and you know, even from straight in the beginning, the opening scene where he goes and you know you see Dave Bautista's character who's, you know, literally farming and minding his own goddamn business completely alone. Like, that sense of, like, you're almost viewing the story from the other side, and, you know, you kind of view your character as the protagonist purely based on perspective.
Yeah. It's powerful. I loved Blade Runner. And I think that relationship is integral to the story. And it's why it's such a good book movie.
Having like a complete blank. Oh, Ryan Gosling too does a wonderful job of sort of carrying on that mystique of the film.
That entire, just to rant a little bit about 2077.
2049.
24, thank you.
Yeah.
Damn.
Cyberpunk.
Yeah. Jesus. Just to rant about that for a moment. I mean, that whole movie was really just a perfect. There are very few sequels that are like just that good, and this one to me was as close as you can come to a perfect sequel. I mean, effectively, it was able to accomplish what we accomplished in the film, but the pacing was 10 times better.
I'm going to contest something you just said.
I'm just waiting for Adam to unmute and say it first.
I think that's a misconception. Sequels are not normally bad. Fuck you. I think that there are way more instances where sequels are not only more popular, but also just literally better than the originals.
To preface,
Star Wars, The Godfather, Jurassic Park, literally.
Shrek 2 is a perfect sequel.
But like, for as many of those exist, there's like 10 other schlock sequels that are just hot garbage.
Right, but I think but I think that goes to show you should judge a film based on its own merits, not the fact that it is or is not a sequel.
Valid. No. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Things being a sequel does not mean.
Sometimes I just want you to know, like, I don't want to be like you think I'm coming at you, but I just, for the viewer's sake, like, we've talked about this type of stuff before, but I kind of want to just, you know, clarify some of those types of things, you know, for their sake.
I think that is a valid point. I don't think that sequels are just bad.
Sequel series can also be very good too. especially if you look at them on your own. And Mikhail, fuck you. I think Korra is amazing.
You're just wrong. I don't know what to tell you. Like, there are good parts, and don't get me wrong, the first season, because I have this opinion when I talk with like other people about it who are pro, like specifically Randy. Frick you, Randy. When I talk to other people, they act like I hated this series from beginning. In reality, I watched it from beginning to end as it came out. I was on its side with every single season that came out, and I was consistently disappointed.
I will say I thought the first season was incredible. I thought it was very good. I thought it had a very compelling antagonist in what's his name, Amon, right?
First season wasn't bad.
First season was good. I thought second season was good too. I thought it was really good. I thought it really explored.
What was the villain from the second season?
Unalaq.
That's right.
I thought that was.
He wasn't the worst. For me, the worst season was season 3.
Okay, I'm watching that currently.
I rank it 1, 2, 4, 3.
Okay.
And the problem with the show too, like the things that bother me about that show, like there are good aspects throughout all of the season. But the real problem with that show is the fact that Nickelodeon didn't fund it properly, and they made that season to season. Every single season, the writers were told, this is the last one. You have to. And I don't think comparing it to Avatar is a fair shake.
We've had a very in-depth conversation about this personally, but I assure you, viewers, this is just, one of the many things we will delve into at some point in the future. We are getting near to where I kind of want to approach a wrapping point. We still haven't done any Q&A from anyone who's watching and has questions, but I do want to kind of... I don't want to call them closing statements because I don't want to just put you in a box. But I do think we should kind of go through. I think, let's just revert back to that original question. I kind of want each one of you to go through and kind of give your statement. What do you think makes a compelling villain? What do you think, whether interpret this however you want. I don't want you to take this a certain way. If you think the answer requires naming or listing the prerequisites, if you think it contains citing an example, if you think it, whatever way you want to take this question, be my guest. And whichever one of you would like to go first, go ahead.
I have a little controversy. Oh, well.
Fuck you,
Mark.
We'll just go in the order of the Discord.
Yeah, we'll go in the order of the screen. I think that relatability, presence, and there was one more that I had that I cannot remember for the life of me. Oh, and perception are the 3 major things that make a villain what they are. I think they have to be in some way relatable, but that's the least important one. They need to have a presence of being a villain, have some kind of, as soon as you see them, oh fuck. And they have to be, they can be good or bad or whatever, but they have to be portrayed in the right light to let them shine. Best villain is Frieza. Eat my ass.
Is the pervert from Dragon Ball?
Yes.
Hello, monkeys.
Yeah, it's Frieza is basically Orochimaru, just they look different.
And Orochimaru is written better.
Okay, actually, yeah, scratch that. Orochimaru is the best villain.
Chat, just because we like anime doesn't mean we're weebs. Fuck weebs. Get out of my chat if you're a weeb, you stupid fucking bitch.
The best antagonist of any anime will always be the beard who thinks that a vampire that looks like an 8-year-old is okay to have sex with just because they're 100 years
Lollies aren't pedophilia! No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah. Just gonna...
Purely jokes. Don't clip that. Don't clip that.
I don't know the context of that, and I'm so confused.
I have no idea what's going on.
And Mikhail's just making fun of... Yeah.
Behind you.
Oh, dude, that's not even a cat. One second.
Mark's getting a fedora.
Are you talking about this?
The hat on Mark's wall back there.
Wow.
I just relost my virginity. It's gone. It's gone, boys.
Jesus Christ.
Belongs to Mark.
My headset doesn't fit over the cowboy hat, but I'm
Yeah, no
basically
shit.
Doug Dimmadome of Dimsdale Dimmadome.
Oh, Dimmadome, under the Dimsdale Dimmadome. And you found my lost son, Tina Turner.
Yo.
Dimmadome? Owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome?
That's right, Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome.
All right, shut the fuck up. Mikhail speaking.
Sorry. All right, so I'll answer this question. There are two villains that I wanted to bring up today. And I think that they epitomize what makes some of the best qualities in villains. To summarize, I think that the best villains are consequent. Whether that be the consequences of the hero's actions, consequences of the world, consequences of the writing, like that is what a good villain shows. And the two villains in my mind that don't necessarily stand out. I tried to pick some like some villains that I didn't think other people were gonna be talking. Slimer from the Ghostbusters, and fuck, what's his name? I pulled up his name because I couldn't remember his name. It's Zach Galifianakis' character from Dinner with Schmucks.
The Hangover. Oh.
No. It is it's like Vernon or Trevor or something. I don't, and it's what kills me because he's a great villain, but like I don't even fucking remember his name. Here's the thing about both of these characters. Slimer is a great villain because it shows the consequence of like the world at large, and is a great comedic villain because like hear me out. The Ghostbusters, right? They are a team of scientists. Most of them have PhDs, several PhDs. Egon is a fucking genius, right? And they literally invented a wearable nuclear accelerator to go fight the new threat, which is these emergent ghosts. And the tool that they are using, the thing that they are getting rid of with these fucking nuclear accelerators on their back is Slimer, a green asshole who is basically more or less minding his own business and just eating some shit out of a carafe in a hotel. Virtually harmless. Effectively, it's the best pun in that or punchline in that movie because everything that they have built up to that point is like this crazy threat of ghosts having this awesome technology, and they use it to just be exterminators, more or less, to fight something that is no more powerful than a rat. I think it's beautiful. Slimer is fantastic and just shows the consequence of the comedic setup in that. Dinner with Schmucks, if you haven't seen it, it's Steve Carell and blanking on who like the good guy. There's like the main. Totally blank. Anyways, this movie about Steve Carell, he's this goofball. And he is invited to this dinner for schmucks. And it's kind of like, there's like a word for this kind of party, but you invite like the weirdest asshole. Whoever invites the weirdest of the assholes.
This podcast.
Right? That's the dinner. And there's this guy in the movie, played by Zach Galifianakis, who is like a villain character. Steve Carell is set up as being a moron. And at one point, they have to go to the IRS office. So already this villain is fantastic because he's an IRS worker. And he has convinced Steve Carell that he's a mind reader. And he's also cucking Steve Carell, fucking his wife. And Steve Carell openly admits this because he's like divorced from his wife. And this dude like brings up, he's like, I'm fucking your wife, right? And he's like, yeah, you're fucking my wife. You could do it better than I ever could. It's hilarious. If you have a chance to watch this movie, watch it. But that is the consequence. He's a great villain because he's the consequence of Steve Carell being so naive, and everything at the end of the movie that makes Steve Carell redeemable, because the whole movie he's just kind of being like this goofball asshole that like, why would anybody want to spend time with this guy? Everything that makes Steve Carell redeemable, this guy is a consequence of. Like, he is taking advantage of him and his wife, like, anytime he can. And he is a villain for it. And the reason he is able to do that, the reason he's able to be a villain, to convince Steve Carell that he has mind reading powers, is because Steve Carell in this movie is genuinely such a nice guy that like somebody like that could just take advantage with him with ease. So that's what I think makes up a great villain. I think it is the consequence. And whatever the answer to that consequence is, if it's the consequence of the world, a la Black Panther, or it's consequence of circumstance like Darth Vader, though that is what makes it a good villain.
Take it away, Nick.
I didn't get to talk about him because he didn't come up naturally. He almost did, but it just completely slipped my mind to actually say it. The best villain for me, on terms of motive, presence, establishment, your first impression, being relatable, and even a form of mystique. Admiral Zhao. This is a man who literally is like a military officer looking to completely destroy waterbending. Like, we don't really know much about him. He went to Wan Shitong's library, which I feel like is a completely overlooked aspect of his entire character. Like, this dude was a genius and like was a military mastermind, albeit like he was obviously insane, but like he was trying to tip the scales of this 100-year war into his favor and just win. And I think, kind of to what Mark was saying, perspective is interesting on that. To the Fire Nation, this dude would have been literally like, he single-handedly turned the war. I mean, he like, and also, if I feel like badass-itude, I don't know what a good word to quantify badassness is. Badass-itude.
Badassery, I think. But
badassery. Okay, yeah. Badassery. He has one of the greatest villain sort of names of all time, the Moonslayer. To me, that's epic. And really, like, I think he's a good counter to the other, obviously, like the other Fire Nation characters that we see in Avatar, where it's like Iroh, who is very peaceful, he's calm, he moves with like an underlying motive of the world, and Zhao knows the impact of what he's doing on the world and chooses to do it anyway. So to me, I think Zhao is one of the strongest villains / antagonists. Honestly, I think in the original Avatar series and throughout a lot of media. That's what I think.
Bet. Alrighty, Adam.
So we touched on a lot of the things I believe, and one other thing, I was talking with my boss about this today, and I asked her what does she think makes a compelling antagonist, and the one thing she said that I didn't necessarily think of was detachment from humanity, especially in thriller and horror movies. And we came to the example of John Doe again, just because of how much I like him and how he detaches himself from everything that he is criticizing humanity for. And he just essentially feels like he's better than them for all these things except for one. And that really, it's a little bit different because you can just feel that they're not the same as you while still being relatable. Like, he gives into wrath at the end, or I'm sorry, he gives into envy at the end, and he still has that flaw of humanity, even though he's detached from it and feels like he's above everything. But other than that, the we said it already, relatable. Mikhail said consequence. I think one other thing that makes taking that one step further is not necessarily consequences of the character or the writing or anything like that, but also if it goes hand in hand with motive, with them having a consequence for failure of their actions, whether it be um, a loved one dying or themselves dying, going to prison, some kind of consequence that's also driving them in addition to their motive, I think can really add another layer that's really nice. Um, but yeah, other than that, we covered pretty much everything else. So that's pretty much all I got.
Alrighty. Last and definitely least, I'll take myself and deliver my opinion. So, I'm going to start off by reiterating something I had stated at the beginning of the podcast, which is that I feel like good villain and compelling villain are different things. I think that when you look at what makes up a good villain, I think that I kind of hold them in two camps. One being compelling villains, which is what this entire podcast has been talking about, discussing, etc. The other grouping of that, which I'm going to bring up, is iconic. That's where I would place villains such as Darth Vader, where I don't really think Darth Vader is actually that iconic. I mean, that compelling.
Whoa!
But I think that Darth Vader kind of fills that role of iconic. I don't think that being iconic is a requirement or a prerequisite to being a compelling villain. And I agree with most of the opinions of my co-host on kind of what builds a compelling villain. I think that it's a very layered and varying subject. But the two examples that I am going to bring up are ones that we didn't discuss at all or anything like them. I'm going to use real world examples. I'm actually not going to use historical figures. I know that by bringing that up, I'm sure a lot of you maybe went directly to, Hitler or the devil. Not that the devil's a real person, but I think is more of a tangible, life villain than these other fictional characters. The two examples I want to bring up are Eric Andre on the Eric Andre Show and Zach Galifianakis on Between Two Ferns. The reason I'm bringing the two of them up is because these are talk shows. They're talk shows which mock and completely ridicule the concept of talk shows, late night talk shows specifically as we know them, whether it be, Larry King, Conan, Jimmy Fallon, doesn't matter. But the people who you would in this scenario view as the protagonist or the hero are the celebrities going on to be interviewed who are, more or less in any other talk show would be the focal point of the show, where the co-host or the host and or co-hosts, if there are any of other late night talk shows, it's sort of like a team. They kind of work together to paint the celebrity in a positive light. And usually when a talk show host goes against their guest, it's typically viewed in a pretty negative way by the media, by pop culture, and also by fans, whether it's of the celebrity or the actual talk show host. Whereas with the two examples I mentioned, Eric Andre and Zach Galifianakis play a directly antagonistic role to the people that they interview. They fuck with them to the point of having multiple guests literally leave. And not leave in like a haha funny gag, but literally be like, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up for haha joke, not for you to literally ridicule me and make fun of me for fucking 45 minutes. And, I think that while they are both playing, characters of themselves and they're playing roles, they're not really, I don't think that either one of them really behave that way in their personal and social lives. I think that
You laughing at me?
those are real life aspects of villains that I think exist in modern society, that because of the internet, because of pop culture as we know it, we literally have people who play, hyper realized versions of villains in talk shows. Which I just, if you haven't watched those shows, if you haven't ever seen any of those interviews, check them out, give them a watch. They're pretty ridiculous, to say the least. but I think that they're worth kind of looking at, especially if you go and viewing them as, a hero to villain relationship compared to normal talk shows. But if you guys don't have any other comments regarding to any of our other anyone's closing statements,
Just one real quick thing. Mikhail, the reason I'm laughing is because this was literally like the exact opposite of where I thought Mario was going with this. Whenever it was like Eric Andre, I was like, Jesus Christ! Like,
surprise, motherfucker!
I mean, all the character traits that I wrote down. Presence, yeah, he's there. He's such a force of chaos. Establishment. He immediately just starts smashing shit. Mystique. I don't know anything about the actual fucking guy. Like, he is literally there to sow chaos and piss people off, and it's wonderful. Relatable. Hell yeah, that shit I would love to do to a fucking celebrity. Be like, hey, fuck you, your movies suck. Like, you're just a bad actor. You're not good at your job. Like, you're just bad. And the first impression that I got of fucking Eric Andre is the clip of him and who I'm assuming is Hannibal Buress in the second half. And they're walking in the trench coat to the fucking car dealership.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy a car today. Is Harry here?
Like,
I don't trust like that.
I don't trust like that. Unbutton that.
I'm not going to get naked in your store.
Unbutton
Like-
your shirt.
Yeah. Before we move on to
Skittles.
our Q&A section, I am, welcome to the self-plug portion of the podcast. If you are listening to this podcast on YouTube, what's up? My name's Burt Macklin. I'm the one who runs shit around here. These are just my friends. They make regular appearances on my stream playing video games with me, making tier lists, and we are doing a weekly podcast, which is going to go straight to YouTube where you might be watching it. Twitch chat, I know you're here. I have a fucking YouTube channel. I also have a TikTok, Burt_Macklin. If you're not following, if you're not subbed on those platforms, find me there. I know you all can't be here every single day when I go live. Yeah, that's right, YouTube. I go live on Twitch.tv every single fucking day, bitch. If you want to catch this podcast live, Mondays, most likely post 6 p.m. Eastern is when the podcast will air live. If not, don't worry. If you're a Twitch chat viewer and you're like, oh fuck, I can't make it to the podcast, that shit is gonna be here on YouTube. Sub to the YouTube. Catch the entire unedited, unclipped version of the podcast in full on YouTube. I'm also working to bring it to Spotify, iTunes, so that way if you want to hear it in audio just and you don't want to see our ugly ass fucking faces talk about our bullshit opinions, you can hear it there. But
And me.
Q&A. If you're in the chat now here on Twitch, oh yeah, by the way, YouTube, if you watch the podcast live, you get to participate in this point. If you have questions, comments, concerns, anything, whatever it is, whether it's for me, whether it's relative to what we talked about today, whether you want to know, are we Team Godzilla, Team Kong, whatever the fuck your heart desires, whether it is for myself or any of my friends, feel free, launch your shit out into the chat now. We'll kind of just do a rundown, hit your questions, get a little one-on-one personal action with chat and the talking hosts of the podcast. So, yeah, there you go. Sniper
We did
Eyes.
have Jared's question from earlier, if we want to address that real
Yep,
quick.
Nick just posted it. Jared.
yeah.
Jared is one of my friends. If you do not know, he may make an appearance at some point here on the podcast, but we are going to handle this question first. Isn't it a compelling villain just a villain that you sympathize with? So wouldn't it be subjective?
No. Next question.
That is how we answer every one of Jared's fucking questions. No.
No, I think what Jared is kind of trying to ask there is like that for him, the compelling part comes down to sympathy, and so what people sympathize with is subjective. So the question of what makes a villain compelling is a subjective question, because what is compelling for one person is not compelling for another. I understand that. I think that's valid. I think, maybe part of the flaw in this is that we're using the word compelling a little more loosely. We're using well written a little bit more loosely And of course, it's going to come down to taste, but I think what we're talking about is more or less the universal that we could agree. I don't think
I'm actually gonna not disagree with what you said, but disagree with a specific aspect of what you said. I don't think we're using compelling loosely. I think people use compelling too specifically in modern uses. I think, if you're one of those motherfuckers out there who just tosses the word compelling around, well, maybe you're using it wrong. But anyways, at the end of the day, I think compelling is a pretty broad subject. And I think that a villain you sympathize with could be compelling. I do not think it is a prerequisite entirely on its own.
See, I like how Sniper put in there explain, and Sniper is literally like one of those essay questions. It's like, why do
Show
you
your work.
Yeah, explain your
Yeah.
answer, and you just put no, no.
All right, I'll explain. No, because no.
Yeah, no, because no. What the fuck what do you
Bitch.
want, Sniper?
Jared plus question equals no.
No, yeah.
Done. Work is shown.
Work is shown. Just draw a crayon on the fucking
Jared
essay.
plus question equals why was Jared?
Real quick. Great antagonists that you love to hate. Math teachers who made you show your work for easy problems.
Yep. Wrath from... Actually, wait, no. Antagonist I love to love, rather. Wrath from Full Metal Brother. Full Metal...
Oh,
yeah.
Middle brother.
Wrath, Lust. Oh, so many good antagonists in that
I
show.
thought about that while I was making my sandwich. I was like, man, I don't really need to be eating right now. It's kind of gluttonous. And I'm like, gluttony? And I'm like, shit. And then I came back up and I think we were talking about Star Wars and I was like, sandwich.
Bert, I have a question regarding the way you will be posting these on YouTube. Sniper Eyes, what's your question?
Yeah,
Yeah, what is your
Button these
question?
Nuts.
Hit us with it, boy.
Are you asking?
I also have some questions because I know we've got a lot of lurkers, potentially listeners, not necessarily active members in chat at the moment. I do have some kind of quick current moment questions that I'll kind of just run through and hit you guys with, just for that little bit of bonus content at the end of the cast. So, are you taking the video straight from Twitch, or is it being recorded elsewhere? It is both. I mean, obviously, Twitch saves my stream. I have it set up to do that. And then separately, I am recording it on my actual computer. I am stupid, brain dead small person, so I don't actually understand how to use the recording software properly yet. And I do know that, like you said, it won't contain chat. But once I attain big brain powers and figure that out, the YouTube videos will contain chat to, entice you fucking YouTube frogs to come fucking watch me on Twitch. I go live every day!
Bet. I'm also wearing a GoPro, so that footage. I got a GoPro on my dick. That photo.
If you want all the midsection action shots of Mikhail mid-podcast, we've got a secondary YouTube channel called Mikhail's Jockstrap, and it's just it's GoPro from the hip. All those power fucking
now that's a compelling antagonist.
What?
I'm the only subscriber.
Yeah, I watch, but I don't subscribe. I like fucking his analytics.
There's a lot of videos of just Nick's face. What the hell?
Specifically, just Nick's forehead. When you do podcasts, you should disable the chat pop up on screen, so when we spam roulette one, it doesn't just kill your screen instantly. Yeah, without a doubt. I entirely agree. We will. That's something we'll handle kind of down the road. Motherfuckers, I'm going to answer you with a question real quick. The way we're going to address these real quick, I'm going to ask y'all a question. You might have a lot to say or a little to say, but whatever, doesn't matter. We're just going to run down the line. Mark, Mikhail, Nikki, and then Adam. Team Kong, Team Godzilla. What the fuck, Mark? What do you do? Lizard Monkey.
Are we asking who I want to see win or who I think is going to
King Kong versus Godzilla. Which one wins, lizard or monkey?
Okay. First off, Godzilla wins. Second off, all I want to see is Godzilla and King Kong fang over fang Mecha Godzilla. That's all I want to see. We can move on from there.
Mikhail, monkey or lizard?
Who I want to win, obviously, gotta be Return of. Let's go, monkey. What I think is going to happen is probably the two of them are going to fight for a little bit, and then Godzilla's going to have King Kong on the ropes, and then King Kong is going to say, boy, I wish my mom Martha were here, and then Godzilla's going to say, wait, hold up. Did you just say Martha? And then King Kong's going to say, yeah, and then Godzilla's going to blow a fucking radiation hole in the middle of his face because nobody cares about that shit. But realistically, the two of them are going to beat the shit out of each other, and then we're going to get Mecha King Ghidorah, which was teased in the last movie. And then they're going to come together and beat his ass, and then they'll set their differences aside.
Nikki J!
I know literally nothing about the
I don't give a shit, lizard or monkey!
I mean, I stand with Mikhail. I want Monkey to win because Return to Monkey.
Garbage opinion, shut up. Adam, be our Lord and Savior.
Wait. But I do think Godzilla's going to win. I just think it's going to happen.
Ooh.
I would like to see. Well, first off, I'm going to say Lizard's going to win, but I would like to see them blow up Madison Square Garden again. Throw back to the old gods.
Same. Yeah, I'm also, on board Team Godzilla. If you support Godzilla, pog you. If you support that stupid fucking ape, then what the fuck is wrong with you? At Mikhail, you dumb bitch. Why are you here? Your opinions are bad. Hot take. You're garbage.
I've been watching Godzilla.
I'm safe.
Fuck you. I've watched the original Toho Godzillas. I watched the new ones. I suffered through Godzilla 2000. You can suck on my balls.
Oh yeah, I also will say, in reference to Godzilla lore, fuck you with your Mecha King Ghidorah bullshit. The head of King Ghidorah, the brain, was used to power OG Mecha Godzilla. So they actually were teasing Mecha Godzilla, not Mecha King Ghidorah. Fuck you.
All right, if you believe they're gonna fall into the exact same.
All right.
Watch it be fucking Mecha Mothra.
Eat my dick and balls. That would be fucking dope. Actually, plot twist. Mothra's literally my favorite one. Mothra is best kaiju. Suck my nuts. All right, we're moving on. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Are you hype? Are you not hype? Did the trailer tickle your jellies? Did you even watch the trailer? Are you a fucking degenerate? Mark, take it away.
I haven't seen the trailer, but I like Winter Soldier, so I'm about it.
What about Falcon?
I like Falcon.
Shut the fuck
He's
up.
cool.
Mikhail, go.
I haven't seen the trailer yet. I am excited for it. My guess is that the plot is more or less going to be, I'm Captain America. No, I'm Captain America. No, I'm Captain America. We're both Captain. That's my guess.
Nikki
I am
J.
excited to see it.
I'm excited to see it. Have yet to see the trailer. But you know what I'm more excited for? Doesn't matter. We're going to Adam.
I am excited to see it. I watched 50% of the trailer because I was eating dinner while watching the Super Bowl, and I looked up and there I saw Anthony Mackie on my screen, and I always have to stop what I'm doing when Anthony Mackie's on my screen.
I want to preface my answer by saying I'm hoping that I get to see Winter Soldier and Falcon get their asses handed to them by that kid whose name I cannot remember. Do you know the comic I'm talking about, Mario? They walk into a house to put this teenager under arrest, and he's like, "This is great. I've always wanted to kill you two." And they're like, "What?" He's like, "I'm a big fan," and he just beats the shit out of them. I want to see that.
We most likely won't. We do know Baron Zemo is the villain, and he's gonna wear his goofy ass purple ski mask. Also, for chat, just so you guys know, guess what? Y'all are gonna have homework for the next podcast. Y'all gotta be on top of this shit, boy! Still on the MCU train. Have you seen WandaVision? Do you recommend WandaVision to the cast? To the fucking viewers, if you've seen it. I know, Mark, Nick, you haven't seen it, but Kyle, you recommend to the viewers, if you haven't watched WandaVision, should you pick it up?
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I'm invested in Marvel. My only rec is there are a lot of people who they like the Marvel movies, but they're not necessarily like what ooh. Like my mom, she likes the movies, but she's not like I remember every single detail. For her, the first couple episodes were hard to get through. But get through them. It's worth it. So far, at least. We're on episode 5 now.
5.
And so far, those 5 have been really good. I enjoyed the first 2. They don't necessarily have, you need to know these characters to get the first 2 episodes. It was confusing for me, too. But for those of you that might be on the fringe of, I really love Marvel or whatever your investment, just get through them. Because as a TV show, it's still pretty good.
Mr. Masterlock, have you seen WandaVision? Can you make an opinion statement?
I have not yet. I am eager to watch it. I just have too many shows on my plate right now.
No worries, no worries.
Partway through Brooklyn Nine-Nine and partway through The 100.
Ooh.
And I need to finish both of those before I start a new show.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I also, not to just redouble down on everything Mikhail said, if you haven't watched WandaVision, if you are not watching it currently, fucking watch it. Episode 5 will literally blow your goddamn mind if you're a fan of superheroes, period. I'm also gonna dip into some video game topics. Bethesda making an Indiana Jones game. Excited? Not excited? Is it going to be dog shit? Is it going to be better than the Tomb Raider video games? What's going to happen? Is Uncharted going to be obsolete? Will the world forget about Nathan Drake after Indy reclaims his throne as the supreme dungeon crawler artifact aficionado?
7 years from now when it comes out, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, when the fuck?
I hate Indiana. No, I'm just fucking kidding. I think
I was about to be so confused.
Yeah. No. I don't know. My theory with all of this, people who get upset about property being made into X form of art, wait till it comes out.
Yeah, I will say,
I'm
disclaimer, we don't know.
I'm excited to see Indiana Jones because I like Indiana Jones, but I don't know anything about it yet.
We have little to no information besides it's Indiana Jones and Bethesda's making it. We don't know if it's going to be young Indy. We don't know if it's going to be in between some of the certain movies. We don't know if it's going to be an overarching plot from young Indy to old Indy. We don't fucking know. We really have little to no idea whether it's going to be in the canon of the movies or what the deal is. We just know that it's coming down the line.
I hope we finally find out why Indiana Jones hates snakes so much.
I hope they know we get to find out why his name's Indiana Jones. Like in Solo.
A cuck.
Like in Solo.
His dad is not a cuck.
Dad's kind of a cuck.
His dad's kind of a cuck, but he got
I'm
invaluable
going to name my son Indiana Jones
after the fucking dog.
The last letter of it.
But he does know that the one chick is a Nazi because he slept with her. And that's huge dick energy.
Hot take, Indiana Jones is better than James Bond. At me at fucking Burt Macklin on Twitter. Call me out on fucking Twitter. If you're not following me on Twitter, follow me on Twitter. That is where I will be providing updates regarding TOTS. Lots and lots of different subjects. You might be able to provide Q&A questions for the podcast. Write to me on Twitter. Potentially even the Discord. If you're not in the Discord, join the Discord. I also post updates there. Bitch. We're going to be moving on. If you have topic ideas, if you have things we want to discuss that are way too long form to be asked in a Q&A format, whether it is here in the show live, at me on Twitter, or in the Discord, contact me in one of those ways. Tag me in Twitter, message me in Discord, provide us your ideas. We have lots of ideas we have in our own tank, but these episodes are going to be coming once a week, and we want you to be entertained. At the end of the day, calling you out again, YouTube frogs, I'm going live on twitch.tv. Twitch chat, I have a fucking YouTube. 1 podcast a week will be on YouTube. 3 videos containing Twitch highlights will be there. Why are you deciding to not consume more Burt Macklin content? What are you doing with your life? I know you have a job. I know you have school. I don't care. Consume my content. Mwah. Goodbye. Alrighty, well, now Twitch chat that it's just us. We're going to play some video games. Fuck this
7
podcast,
days
boys.
to die.
7 days to suck my dick.
Damn it. It was worth a shot.
Wait, what was the question?
I just
7
said
days to die.
yeah.
Why not one day?
All right, chat. I'm back. I can give you attention now. I can suckle on your fucking teat. I can do whatever you need me to do. Wah
Who is
wah wah.
Polar Knights?
Ugin, what's
Polar
up?
Knights?
Sniper Eyes, what's up? Polar Knight,
up. I will
what
be
beard
back in a
oil
few
you
moments.
use, Bert? I don't know the brand. I actually have not been using oil as much lately. Burt's Bees makes a beer pomade. It is way easier to apply, and it actually has been really helping with some dry skin issues I get in the winter underneath this thick-ass beard. Recommend Burt's Bees beard pomade. Really fucking nice, really cost affordable. Also, Twitch chat. You know, Polar Knight, I don't recognize your name. I saw someone in the chat earlier. I didn't recognize your name. If you're not following me on twitch.tv, drop a follow. Get a notification when I go live each and every day. Myself, always going to be here. Some of my friends here on the podcast and other ones I have are always around. We're playing video games. We're making tier lists, doing the podcast. Tons of fucking entertaining content. I play with viewers on the regular. If you want to be a part of this absolutely stellar climb to the top of Twitch, hop in. I've only been doing this shit for like 40-something days. We broke 350 followers. We're about to hit 150 subs. Before you know it, I'm going to be at the top of Twitch. You know, just like my Twitch channel bio says, I'm the fastest growing new streamer on the platform. And do I have any evidence of that? No. No, I don't. Do I need any? No. No, I don't. Follow me.